Chapter 271. The kitten was placed beside Jingwan. Jingwan used her hand to stroke the kitten from head to tail. Inexplicably, she felt like she was stroking someone's fur. "Princess Consort, do you like this cat?" The old woman was a bit cautious and reserved. She also had the indescribable excitement of meeting a noble person. It was very suitable for an ordinary woman. Jingwan nodded and said with a smile, "Auntie, what is your surname?" She had the intention to chat with the old woman. This commoner's husband's surname is Shou. The old woman also had the intention to continue chatting with Jingwan. The old man is already gone. That old thing was so cruel, he even took his eldest son away. It's fine if he made this old woman a widow, but he also made her send off her own child. Saying this, her eyes couldn't help turning red. "My condolences." Other than this, Jingwan didn't know what else to say. The old woman wiped the corners of her eyes. "This is something that happened many years ago. I've let Princess Consort see a joke. This commoner originally had 4 sons and 1 daughter, but the one who offended the Princess Consort this morning was the eldest daughter of the 3rd son, who is also the eldest granddaughter. That woman is the eldest daughter-in-law, and speaking of her, she is a pitiful person. When the eldest son was alive, they didn't have a son or a daughter. Her maternal family only had her brother and sister-in-law, and they were all harsh people. They couldn't bear for her to go back and suffer, so they wanted her to remarry, but she wasn't willing. All these years she has served this commoner without any complaints or regrets. The 3rd son is still all right. He and his wife already have a son and a daughter, so it can be considered complete." Jingwan secretly thought, "It's here. This should be the reason." "Princess Consort, you don't know. Our family has 5 children. Only our daughter was born to this commoner and the old man. The other 4 sons were all adopted. This commoner married him for many years and didn't have a child. I don't know how much medicine I ate and how many Buddhas I prayed to, but there was no result. He was an honest and filial person. He resisted the pressure of his parents and didn't divorce this commoner. Fortunately, he was the eldest son, so this commoner's heart didn't feel so guilty. After the 2 elders passed away, the brothers separated from the family. The other brothers called him unfilial and kicked us out of the family with almost nothing. We moved away from our original residence. The old man said, 'It doesn't matter if we don't have a child. We can just adopt one.' So we had the eldest son. He was originally a beggar. Once he started, there was no end. The 2nd son was kidnapped. After he escaped, he met us. But at that time he fell ill. When he woke up, he didn't remember his original home. The 3rd child had no parents and was treated harshly by his uncle and aunt. As for the 4th child, he was originally a posthumous child. When his mother gave birth to him, she died in childbirth. However, I never thought that I would get pregnant 3 years later. I was so happy that I was extremely careful about the children in my belly and naturally neglected them. However, they were all very sensible. The older one took care of the younger one and never let me worry about the housework. In fact, in order to let me eat better, the older one and the younger one secretly went out to work. At that time they were 13 and 11. I felt that with these children, even if they were not my biological children, my life was worth it. Recalling the past, the old woman was unable to control herself. There was one time when the old man went out to work and saved a person. Who would have thought that the person was coincidentally 2nd brother's biological father? Naturally, we were happy that 2nd brother was able to come home. In order to thank our family, 2nd brother only changed his surname and did not use his original name. Although 2nd brother's family was not high officials or nobles, to us, they were already too high to reach. Their family, on the other hand, were kind people. We were not willing to move to their city, but we still sent a lot of things to them every year. However, one year we suddenly lost contact with them. We were worried, so we asked the older one to look for them. The result was that something happened to their family and the whole family was gone. We did not know the details. During that time our family was very depressed. Then there was a robbery. The old man was beaten. The older one went to reason with them, but in the end he was beaten to death. It was simply a disaster. The 3rd child was schemed against and owed a debt. Then there was a natural disaster. It was clear that they did not want to give us a way out. My daughter's name was Ku Exin. She was very beautiful, but she was taken away by the bad guys. She was only 11 years old. It was simply heartless. Just when the family was in despair, the younger one came back. He was a good child, but he seemed to have changed into a different person. He was a man of few words. He immediately went to save my daughter. Although the result was not the worst, but he was one step too late. From then on, Kuexin was very afraid of men. Other than the younger one who saved her, no one else, including her other brothers and father, could get close to her. At that time her father was still lying in bed and his condition was getting worse and worse. At that time the younger one promised that he would wait for Kuexin to grow up and marry her as his wife. As long as she does not despise him for being a loner. Speaking of which, how could she despise him for being a loner? But what happened to him that made him like this? He had a fiancée, but before the wedding his fiancée suddenly went into mourning and the wedding was postponed. Although the possibility was low, she still had to be prepared. It wasn't as if there had never been a case where the entire plan had collapsed due to some insignificant reasons. The old woman nodded. Yes. Everyone in the capital knows that official Yu does not have any relatives. They only know that he is the second son based on his name. But it turns out that there is such a story behind it. The second son is the second son in our family, but he is the eldest son in the Yu family. But in order to match his name, the Yu family spread the news that he had an elder brother who died young. So it's like that. The Yu family is a family that is loyal and affectionate. But to be able to raise official Yu to be such a dignified person, your Zhou family cannot go unnoticed. Princess Consort is too kind. Her own child was praised and even her own family was recognized. Naturally she was happy. Although it is very presumptuous, can you tell me who the other party is? Although Jingwan said it in a tactful manner, the old woman understood. The second son's identity is limited, so it is not convenient to investigate some things. But there is one person whose identity is confirmed, and that is Prince Rui's brother-in-law. The last sentence was filled with endless hatred. If the person in question was in front of her, she might skin him alive and drink his blood. At the mention of Prince Rui's brother-in-law, Jingwan thought of the flower competition at the flower market last year. Was it the same person? If it was, it could only be said that this kind of person was beyond the scope of a hedonistic son. Killing a good girl to death was not something that could be brushed aside just because he was rich and powerful and spent all day eating, drinking and fooling around. His father was a cabinet elder who was busy fighting for power and neglected the education of his children. Even if he ascended to the sky, the Lu family would not be able to stand in the clouds for long. Jingwan stroked the kitten, then picked it up and handed it back to the old woman. And he take this little guy back. I think your granddaughter will like it very much. I won't take it away from her. Princess Consort Yu. The old woman's face suddenly changed. Don't misunderstand. I will talk to His Highness. Moreover, Lord Yu is the commander of the Imperial Guards. Many people want to win him over. Now that he has delivered himself to His Highness's door, His Highness has no reason to refuse. I don't like those people who commit crimes. I will do my best to facilitate a win-win situation. Thank you, Princess Consort. Thank you, Princess Consort. The old woman knelt down and kowtowed with tears of gratitude. Get up. Jingwan hurriedly reached out to help her up. This humble woman has a presumptuous request. Can His Highness help me find out who this person is? Chapter 272. The old woman seemed to have said a lot, but because she got into the main topic from the beginning, she didn't spend much time on it. However, this was the prince's mansion after all. Usually no one would come here. Even if it was an old woman who did not attract much attention, if someone came here on a whim, who knew what kind of trouble it would cause? The living king of hell would definitely be fine. It was just that before the Zhou family could help, it would not be good if the Zhou family got into trouble first. Before leaving, Jingwan told the old woman, Auntie, after you go back, don't do unnecessary things with the family. However, regarding your daughter's matter, fight for it. Other than that, just pretend that you don't know anything and don't have anyone backing you up. If someone wants to use money to settle the matter, just accept it when you think it's enough. Don't do unnecessary things and hurt yourself. Leave the rest to us. No matter who it is, no matter how involved they are in the murder, one day they will pay a heavy price. The old woman was a little agitated, but she suppressed it in the end. However, her expression didn't look good. This commoner doesn't want their stinky money. My daughter's life, my daughter's reputation. Auntie, don't be agitated. Listen to me first. The money itself isn't wrong, it's the people who use it that are wrong. If you feel uncomfortable with the money, use it to help people in need. After all, the other party had killed someone, so they would definitely feel guilty. If you don't accept it, they will think that you won't let it go. In that case, no one knows what they will do. Perhaps it is because of you that Lord Yu is suppressing his anger and pain. Something happens to all of you, he will no longer have any restraints. What will he do? Even if he is highly valued by the emperor, his position is destined to be a lonely official. Then can he wrestle with Prince Rue? The old woman's lips trembled and tears flashed in her eyes. Princess Consort, you are right. My daughter is already gone. I can't let my son and the whole family be lost. At the same time, she thought that her second son might have thought of the key points, but he didn't say anything. Was he trying his best to protect them now? It's good that you can think it through. I know that when it comes to this kind of thing, it's easy for others to say, but you can't experience that kind of pain. You can't be rational just because you want to. Even if you do something irrational, it's understandable. In fact, you are much stronger than the average person. You are also a mother worthy of respect. Princess Consort is indeed Princess Consort. You say different things. However, this commoner really doesn't dare to accept it. Jingwan didn't say anything more. She ordered someone to send the old woman out. She must ensure her safety and eliminate any possible danger. When I sent people to investigate his background, I was almost fooled. It's because of this that no one paid attention to Yu Zhongqing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hide the Zhou family so well. In fact, if it weren't for his previous life, Li Hongyuan wouldn't have known about Yu Zhongqing's background. Then what does a Yuan want to tell me? For me, I don't necessarily need Yu Zhongqing. Although I know about the existence of the Zhou family, this matter has nothing to do with me. Such a thing had happened in his previous life. Because it was related to Yu Zhongqing, he could barely remember it, but he didn't know when it happened. At most he would let it go, but he had no obligation to protect the Zhou family. And this matter was beneficial to him, so why should he stop it? If it weren't for Wan Wan, in order to subdue Yu Zhongqing, the Zhou family would have been schemed against by me. Wan Wan doesn't want me to kill needlessly, right? Jingwan reached out and hugged him, burying her head in his neck. Ah Yuan, Li Hongyuan smiled. His Wan Wan was surprisingly easily moved. So Jingwan was miserably deceived by him. By the way, Jingwan got up and looked at him. Since you investigated Lord Yu so clearly, you must know what happened to the Yu family. He is the only one left in his family. According to his adoptive mother, he still doesn't know who the mastermind is. Ah Yuan, you must know, right? So what if I know? Then I'll be a good person until the end. Wan Wan, which eye of yours can see that your husband is a good person? Li Hongyuan smiled lightly, especially with his eyes. However, as she spent day and night with him, Jingwan's perception became more and more acute. At this time, someone was a little dangerous. Well, when his illness acted up, it meant that she had to bow down. It was reasonable to say that occasionally jealous between husband and wife could improve their relationship. However, a certain someone completely took it as a form of entertainment and would act up from time to time. Sometimes he even deliberately used it as a pretext to make a fuss. If he thought that he was being unreasonable and ignored him, he would instantly turn evil and the consequences would be even more serious. Therefore, this kind of thing should be avoided as much as possible. One of the minefields was that other men must not be paid too much attention to. Ah Yuan, regardless of whether you are a good person or a bad person, there is no such thing as a pure good person or a pure bad person in the world. I simply feel that since he is about to become your subordinate, giving him an appropriate benefit is also the way to rule, isn't it? Now, you probably can't immediately help him take revenge for the new hatred, but for the old hatred, even if you just tell him who his enemy is, he should be deeply grateful to you, right? Naturally, his loyalty will be higher. So, everything is for your sake. Look at my sincere eyes. Li Hongyuan smiled and kissed her eyes. Wan Wan is doing her best for her husband. I am very comforted. Was this what she meant by exhausting herself? Then, at a certain someone's level, he had probably died 800 times. However, whatever you say, it is fine as long as you don't go crazy easily. But thinking about it, Ah Yuan must be aware of these things in his heart. I am just doing something unnecessary. Nothing can compare to Wan Wan's sincerity. The way to rule naturally didn't need anyone to teach him. Wan Wan's original intention was definitely not like this. Seeing that she was trying so hard to avoid his love, he would let her off this time. However, the narrow-minded living king of hell said that his wife could do whatever she wanted, but he couldn't just let Yu Zhongqing off the hook. He would remember this debt. As a result, Li Hongyuan's army of miserable people increased by another member. They were always being dealt with in various ways, but they didn't know the reason. However, just because of this they wouldn't go as far as to switch sides. After seeing Li Hongyuan's ability and means, if they still had other thoughts, then their brains would be flooded with water. However, since Lord Yu already knows something about Yuan, will he suspect that you are scheming against him? Jingwan tapped his shoulder. As someone who shares a pillow, that's what he thinks. If he is so suspicious and secretly planted a double agent, this kind of thing won't happen. The Zhou family is already his most sincere proof of allegiance. He is a person who values friendship and righteousness. He won't let a second person control the Zhou family. Since he has done so, he won't suspect me. However, since Wan mentioned this, I will go and confirm it. In fact, it didn't matter. There would always be trouble to deal with in the future. Therefore, the slightest possibility should be nipped in the bud. But there should be other things in the next 2 days. What? You will know when the time comes. Wan will like it, but I am afraid you will have to work hard at that time. Since you like it, what's the harm in working hard? I'm looking forward to it. Chapter 273. The next day, also at night after Jingwan went to bed, Li Hongyuan let someone lead Yu Zhongqing into Jin Qing Wang Fu. Perhaps it was the first time he saw Li Hongyuan's imposing manner. Yu Zhongqing unconsciously knelt down. Li Hongyuan sat in the chair behind the main table looking down at Yu Zhongqing. He still looked the same as usual with some carelessness. The other people in the room didn't dare to breathe loudly, especially Yu Zhongqing. After a while, his forehead couldn't stop the fine beads of sweat from falling. It wasn't the first day or two that he faced Lu Qingdi, but he never felt this kind of pressure. Not the emperor, but better than the emperor. This kind of man was born to be the emperor. If he wasn't the emperor, then he must be a figure like the regent. No matter how old the person on the throne was, as long as he was there, he could only be a puppet. And if the person in power was ambitious and unwilling to be manipulated, then Li Hongyuan would certainly usurp the throne and bring disaster to the world. Yu Zhongqing secretly clenched his fist, rejoicing that he chose this kind of person, but at the same time he was somewhat apprehensive. Because this kind of master wasn't easy to get along with. This kind of master had strong control over the people below but weak reliance. Thinking of his usual reputation and style, it could be imagined what would happen if he betrayed him. In a short time, Yu Zhongqing's thoughts turned thousands of times, but he always paid attention to Li Hongyuan's reaction. If he was distracted the first time, he wouldn't need to mix in the future. And for a worthless person, why should his master take revenge for him? The next time Li Hongming comes to find you, just agree that you don't need to get any information from him. On the contrary, Ben Wang will provide you with some convenience and help you stand firm on his side. Ben Wang has always believed that it is only interesting to take revenge on your own. It is more interesting to endure humiliation and work by the enemy's side. At the crucial moment, stabbing him with a knife is more interesting. Yu Zhongqing lowered his head. The enmity of his family's extermination, he was able to draw a bow but not release it. Now it was just a knife hidden on the enemy's side. Yes. Ingde didn't hesitate. The only problem now was that he had been rejecting the other party all this while. Now that he suddenly agreed, he naturally needed a suitable reason. He would probably have to deal with this himself. This prince will take care of the Zhou family and arrange suitable jobs for them. Unless they seek death themselves, the one who dies will be someone else. Thank you, Your Highness, Yu Zhongqing said gratefully. There was nothing wrong with Yu Zhongqing's character and he was determined enough. However, he was also a cold person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have remained untouched for so many years. The Zhou family was probably the only soft spot in his heart. As for Zhou Kersen, it doesn't matter if Zhou Kersen treats her as his fiancée or his younger sister. The Zhou family is Zhou Kersen's weakness. Dong Xuebing blamed himself for what happened to Zhou Kersen. If he had exposed them from the start, no one would dare to treat Zhou Kersen like this. But now it has happened and it's useless to think about it. Take revenge and send those people to hell one by one. Yu Zhongqing had not avenged his family's extermination and now he had to bear new hatred. Although Yu Zhongqing's expression did not change, his mentality had changed. Once such a person is buried in hatred, he will be very scary. How much do you know about your family? Li Hongyuan asked. Yu Zhongqing abruptly raised his head and glanced at Li Hongyuan before quickly lowering his head. This subordinate is incompetent. Li Hongyuan could clearly see the uncontrollable malevolence in Yu Zhongqing's body. However, Li Hongyuan was not affected at all. You know nothing? You're also useless. I really wonder how you got to your current position. However, that person today cherishes power and authority. His sons are growing up one by one. Although he appears to be benevolent, he is actually more and more wary of others. It is reasonable that he would rely on someone like you who has no family or background and who is respected by others because you rely on him. To put it bluntly, Yu Zhongqing was only able to climb to the position of the palace guard's chief commander because of luck. This was what Li Hongyuan meant. Yu Zhongqing was neither sad nor happy. It was not known if he thought so himself or if he did not care about this matter at all. Wang Fei's mouth is soft, but her heart is even softer. She can't bear to see others not doing well. You didn't do anything for Ben Wang, but she asked for benefits for you first. It's Wang Fei's benevolence. He already knew how the Zhou family got close to Jin Wangfei. If it was someone else, not to mention achieving their goal, it would be good if they did not cause trouble. It's good that you know. Yu Zhongqing, treat Ben Wang as your master. She is the second master, the same as Ben Wang. Do you understand? Li Hongyuan naturally wanted to tear the person who was thinking about Jingwan into pieces. But other than that, Li Hongyuan did not mind adding more capital for her. Yu Zhongqing's heart trembled. Although he realized that Jin Qinhuang treated Wang Fei differently, he did not expect it to be to this extent. Yes. However, she thinks that you might think that Ben Wang is scheming against you. She also thinks that Ben Wang is worried for nothing. Then Yu Zhongqing, what do you think? The sweat on Yu Zhongqing's forehead became more obvious. He did not know if his new master was using Wang Fei to test him or if he had other motives. Sure enough, even if he was kneeling here, the dust had not settled yet. Wang Fei is sincere in thinking about Wang Yi. It's understandable for her to think more about Wang Yi. This subordinate might have had such doubts before, but from now on this subordinate will not have such thoughts anymore. Because Wang Yi does not need it. That's right, he does not need it. Perhaps to him he was of little value. At this moment Yu Zhongqing's understanding was very clear. Yu Daren's words are too much. You are still useful to Ben Wang. With you around, at least fewer people will die. After all, Wang Fei hopes that Ben Wang will kill less. Human lives in his mouth were decided so lightly. Was it according to his nature that he did not mind using absolute force to solve everything? Did it not matter if blood flowed like a river and people were plunged into misery and suffering? It made people rejoice that there was still someone like Jin Qinhuang who could tie him down. Ben Wang will send people to investigate your family's matter. The time limit is 1 month. Many thanks, Wang Ye. All right, you can go back. This subordinate will retire. Yu Zhongqing got up and left. Li Hongyuan sat quietly in the study for a while. He did not have the mood to deal with other matters and went back to sleep. Hugging his wife to sleep was a great enjoyment. Jin Qinhuang, who had always indulged in enjoyment, expressed that this matter could not be stopped. Jingwan was in a daze and mumbled a few words. She was also in a half-asleep and half-awake state, but she seemed to be used to it from time to time. Yu Zhongqing. Jingwan made an "ode" sound and continued to sleep without any effect. This actually had a bit of a sequela for Jingwan. That was, she would mistakenly think that she was dreaming. When she woke up the next morning, she would completely forget about it. When she suddenly remembered at a certain time, she would know that she had forgotten something important. She was speechless towards Li Hongyuan and even suspected that he did it on purpose. However, even so, this point had not changed. The next day, Li Hongyuan got up early and directly had people bring over the Qinhuang robe. Wearing it, he was handsome and heroic. But looking at this person's appearance, no one would associate him with powerlessness, even though he was indeed not related to this point. From the first morning of their marriage, Jingwan had never helped Li Hongyuan dress. To a certain extent, she was really an unqualified wife. Even when they slept at night, she slept on the inner side. Occasionally, when she woke up in the middle of the night, it was also Li Hongyuan who got up to give her something to drink. She was really regressing the more she lived. At this time, Jingwan was just symbolically helping Li Hongyuan tidy up his clothes because there was no place for her to tidy up. Why did your highness think of wearing a Qinhuang robe today? To attend court. Jingwan was slightly startled. She just realized that this man was a Qinhuang who needed to attend court. But she couldn't be blamed. Who asked him to do this kind of thing since they got married a month ago? Thus, Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan with a teasing gaze. Has your highness thought it through today? This prince wants to hug his wife and continue to sleep. Unfortunately, the one on the dragon throne sent word that I must come today. Ah Yuan, why are you so obedient? Jingwan moved closer. You have your own matters to attend to. Wan knows me well. Jingwan patted him. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry and go. Don't be too late and provoke public anger. They were already angry 800 years ago. But since Ben Wang is willing to show up, they should be deeply grateful. If they have any opinions, they should hold it in for Ben Wang. It was those people who had long been numb to it. Li Hongyuan left Jin Qin Wang Fu. The Qin Wang ceremonial guards entered the palace in a grandiose manner. On the carriage, his expression was calm and without any ripples. The next day after Jingwan and the others returned from the country residence and entered the palace to pay their respects, Lu Qingdi received a secret memorial. This year in the Jiangnan region, there were problems with several counties' academy examinations. Corruption was not enough to justify it. They openly looked for people to take the examinations and bribed the examiners to buy places. For some reason it was exposed. More than a dozen students died in succession. The matter was getting bigger and bigger and the scope was getting wider and wider. In particular, there was a county that was affected by last year's flood and had yet to recover its vitality. When this matter came out, it was simply one disaster after another. At the same time, for some reason, the salt policy was also involved. The officials filled their own pockets and officials protected each other. The loss of money amounted to tens of millions of taels. Along with the secret memorial, there was also a list of people's positions and their affiliation. Among the princes who participated in the court, except for the rich Li Hongyuan, even the sickly fifth Wang Ye was among them. Of course, it was said that this was only a part of it. One could imagine Lu Qingdi's expression. Looking at all his sons, he wished he could tear them apart alive. Originally, as an adult prince, it was understandable for him to receive some filial piety. Lu Qingdi also would not care. But the amount was so huge, where did he use it? What did he want to do? He was not dead yet. Chapter 274. Each and every one of them wanted to defend themselves, but they were often scolded as soon as they opened their mouths. The more they spoke, the more miserable they were scolded. Disobedience, unfilial disrespect, and even treason were scolded. Of course, not everyone was qualified to receive the last one. As the saying goes, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. This was probably the best description of Prince Kong and Prince Rui, followed by the Gong Prince. These big trees endured the merciless destruction of Lu Qingdi's storm. All their jobs were suspended and they didn't receive any salary for several years. If it weren't for Wan Ruizhong's persuasion before Lu Qingdi opened his mouth to remove their titles, Lu Qingdi was afraid that he would have overthrown all the powerful princes. Although in the future, if he wanted to restore his title and remove the imprisonment, it was only a matter of a word from him. But the emperor also needed a reason to change his orders, and excuses were not so easy to find. Fortunately, Lu Qingdi wasn't completely irrational. After scolding his subjects, he found a way out. But thinking about it, it was still difficult to get rid of his anger. Their salary was suddenly increased from 3 years to 10 years. After that, they would all go home and eat their old money. If they dared to stretch their claws, he would directly chop them off. However, no matter how many years the salary was, basically no one cared. 10 years, no one believed that Lu Qingdi could sit on the throne for another 10 years. And no matter who ascended the throne, as long as they were still alive, they wouldn't be treated unfairly in terms of salary. No matter what, they would show mercy. However, Lu Qingdi, this angry lion, was not so easy to calm down this time. Including Empress Sun and imperial concubine Su, not to mention a group of favored concubines who were related to the previous dynasty. Whenever they said a word, he would immediately give them a cold face. The harem is not allowed to interfere in politics, and then leave in a huff. The concubines also became silent, not daring to say a word. Of course, the current situation was that Lu Qingdi didn't go to their palace at all. They couldn't see him, so what else could they say? They began to play tricks again. After the 2 concubines were demoted one after another, they didn't dare to make any more moves. Of course, only the favored concubines would do this kind of thing. Lu Qingdi didn't go to the harem? This was not the case. These days he had been resting in Consort Qin Shu's Sweet Dew Palace almost every night. Now, in the imperial court and the harem, it seemed that this was the only place that could make him feel peaceful. Perhaps Qin Shufei was not a tactful person, but she was gentle and quiet. Perhaps because Lu Qingdi did not like her, she was naturally not the understanding flower in Lu Qingdi's heart. It was just that when he was irritable he always felt more comfortable with her. Speaking of which, Lu Qingdi was a complete scumbag, a typical example of a heartless man. When Lu Qingdi held a court assembly, no one who was qualified to attend could be left out. This was the reason why Li Hongyuan attended court. Everyone outside the main hall looked at the late arrival of Jin Qinhuang. He still had that undisciplined posture, that handsome appearance, as if nothing could affect him. It really made people very jealous and very angry. Everyone's hair was turning white. For many days, even if there was a happy occasion at home, they could not reveal a smile. Not to mention the palace servants who served Lu Qingdi, they did not dare to breathe loudly. Usually they would do everything they could to get close to Lu Qingdi. Now that they got a good job, they could only grit their teeth and open their mouths in hatred. They secretly hated that the people above were not good. In the past they used all kinds of benefits, said all kinds of good words, but they did not have the chance to show their faces. Now, who wants to put Jin Qinhuang in a gunny sack? Raise your hand and sign up. Let's team up and put the gunny sack. No matter what they thought, when Li Hongyuan approached, they still had to pay their respects and greet him. Just as Li Hongyuan said, his appearance was already giving face. Now that he nodded in response, the other party should feel flattered. Only Luo Peishan, as his wife's biological grandfather, could make him lower his posture and say a few words. However, the main topic of their conversation was probably Jingwan. It seemed to be harmonious, but it was more or less a little strange. It was just that Li Hongyuan's timing was more accurate. With just a few words before the others could say anything, the court assembly began. Civil and military officials lined up in the main hall, preparing for Lu Qingdi's arrival. In this regard, Lu Qingdi almost didn't let anyone off. After all, this court assembly didn't happen every day. If he could fish for 2 days and dry the net for 3 days, then he could be a pure fatuous ruler. Sitting high on the dragon throne, he looked down at the people below and shouted, "Long lived," 3 times with a calm face. However, looking at Li Hongyuan, who was obediently among them, this bastard at least didn't embarrass him this time. Among the adult princes, he was the only one who wasn't affected at all. He felt very comforted. If the others knew Lu Qingdi's thoughts, would they vomit blood in anger? If they had as much money as Li Hongyuan, they wouldn't have done anything to the salt policy. However, those who knew the real situation of Li Hongyuan only wanted to laugh at Lu Qingdi. Although they didn't know the details, how could the living king of hell be indifferent to such a fat piece of meat like the salt policy? Don't joke. It was hard to say how much money would eventually fall into his hands. This incident seemed to be unintentionally implicated because of the academy examination, but no one would believe that Li Hongyuan wasn't involved in it, especially those who clearly knew that Li Hongyuan wanted to touch Prince Rue's money. As for the others, sorry, they were all implicated by Prince Rue. The victim didn't know and the victim didn't know. Because everyone was implicated, no one suspected that this incident was deliberately set up. They only thought that they were too unlucky. Lu Qingdi's purpose today was very simple. How to deal with these 2 incidents. Whether it was the academy examination or the salt policy, they were not trivial matters. The former could be said to be related to the future of Qiyuan. Nearly 40% of the Qiyuan's officials were sent from Jiangnan. If it was really serious, the other officials from Jiangnan would not be indifferent. Maybe some people would take this opportunity to do something bad and the consequences could be imagined. As for the salt policy, a large proportion of Qiyuan's finance also came from this. If there was a disaster or war, the national treasury was likely to be in trouble. Originally, the south had just suffered a big flood, and now the situation at the border was a little strange. How could Lu Qingdi not be furious? This time he sent people to Jiangnan to conduct a thorough investigation. Who would be the imperial envoy? This was the most important point. Because of the wide range of connections, there were too few suitable people and it was difficult to be impartial. The suitable people either had low status and couldn't control the situation. Even if they had the token given by the emperor and received the emperor's order, they still said beautiful words and disobeyed in public but disobeyed in private. You couldn't easily deal with them. Or they were in a high position and couldn't leave. No one had ever heard of a level 1 official being the imperial envoy. In short, all parties recommended a lot of people, but there were always people who strongly opposed. In the entire court there was no suitable person to be found. Lu Qingdi's face turned green again. Beloved official Ruan, do you have a suitable candidate? Wan Ruizhong stood out. Emperor, why not let Jin Qinhuang be the imperial envoy? As soon as these words were spoken, the imperial court fell deathly silent. Following this, many people voiced their objections in unison. Wan Ruizhong was neither fast nor slow as he faced the officials. This official only asks everyone, why do you oppose? Who can be more suitable than Jin Qinhuang? I oppose. Naturally, it was because Jin Qinhuang was useless and didn't know anything. What could he do if he went? Of course they couldn't say it like that. In the end, he was the emperor's son. If the emperor reprimanded him like this, he could dislike him as much as he liked, but it was absolutely not up to these officials to make irresponsible remarks. Emperor, the last time 9th Wangye went to the west as an imperial envoy, the symbolic meaning was greater than the actual meaning. This time Jin Qinhuang doesn't need to do anything, he only needs to suppress the officials in Jiangnan to achieve his goal. What kind of temper Jin Qinhuang has, everyone knows. He received the emperor's order. If he says one, who dares to say two? If he asks people to investigate thoroughly, who dares to do it half-heartedly? Moreover, Jin Qinhuang has countless wealth and has seen countless beauties. No one can buy him off. He has no relationship with the various parties in the court. In this official's opinion, even if this matter has nothing to do with his Wangye, there is no more suitable candidate than Jin Qinhuang. The words were so straightforward and the fact was so, it made people speechless. With Jin Qinhuang's temper, taking the emperor's position was simply equivalent to taking the imperial sword that didn't exist in the Qi Yuan dynasty. Killing first and reporting later, it was absolutely not a game. Moreover, he was a prince. With the title of prince, if he killed you, then he killed you. What can you do to him? Even if you went to hell, you would have nowhere to complain. But it was also because of this that if he was appointed as an imperial envoy, then this time Jiangnan would definitely be shaken. Who knows how many people would die, those who would be pulled down would definitely be more, and all parties would suffer heavy losses. This was absolutely not what some people wanted to see. They all racked their brains to stop it, but they really couldn't find a suitable reason. Emperor, this official agrees. Luo Peishan was the first to stand up, and then many people expressed their agreement. And looking at Lu Qingdi's expression, it seemed that he was also very moved. Without a doubt, there was no more suitable candidate than this son. As for the worry that he would take the opportunity to seize power and buy people's hearts, as long as he let people who were completely loyal to him travel with him, all the problems would not be a problem. Lu Qingdi secretly thought that this was very good. Does anyone else have a suitable person to recommend? This basically meant that they had already agreed with the Grand Secretary's proposal. Opposition, reason, and candidate both were indispensable, but no one could do it. Their hearts vomited blood, but they could only pinch their noses and accept it. Therefore, more and more people seconded the proposal. At this time, if they stubbornly resisted to the end, it would only leave a bad impression in front of the emperor. Did they still want to live? Have you asked for my opinion? Seeing that almost everyone seconded the proposal, Li Hongyuan very unsociably opened his mouth. This time almost everyone choked, but soon many people's hearts emerged with joy. Who could stop this matter? Probably only the main character. If he didn't do it, even if he was tied up and brought to Jiangnan, as long as he didn't do anything or did something else, it would only have the opposite effect. Lu Qingdi wanted to get down from the dragon throne and beat this evil creature to death. But he also knew that if this evil creature's temper was really bad, he really couldn't do anything to him. He sighed, "Old Six, are you really not willing to share the burden and solve the difficulties for Imperial Father?" This time, as beloved official Ruan said, "You don't need to do anything. You only need to preside over the overall situation at the appropriate time and let the subordinates work seriously. Just take it as a trip to Jiangnan. What do you think?" Li Hongyuan frowned. Although he was a person who didn't yield to force or persuasion most of the time, he would occasionally yield to force, but he absolutely wouldn't yield to force. As for other things, I have the final say. Lu Qingdi's eyebrows twitched, within a reasonable range. If he really let him go, who knew what he would do? What is reasonable? Li Hongyuan tirelessly asked. Lu Qingdi was irritable. Other sons didn't have to go through so much trouble to do things. Understand by yourself, understand? But what could he do? This evil creature was spoiled by him. Outside of official business, you can eat, drink, and play as you wish. If others don't provoke you, don't casually cause trouble. More specifically, you are not a 3-year-old child. I know. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave first. When you set off, just let me know. Scram scram. Luchingdi weakly waved his hand. Sometimes he wanted to ask what kind of sin did he commit in the end. Li Hongyuan slipped away. After deciding on the imperial envoy, the next step was to choose the main entourage. Li Hongyuan was only a mascot. These people were the most important. However, because mascots couldn't be provoked, their lethality was too great, so they had to be chosen carefully. Luchingdi was too lazy to wrangle with them anymore. With a wave of his hand, he only chose the most suitable person. In other words, no matter who they worked for, Luchingdi also said the ugly words first. If Jin Qinhuang handled it because of official business, not only would he not judge it according to the circumstances, he would also add 3 levels to the crime. If the circumstances were serious, the entire family would be searched. In order to have more deterrence, he even appointed Zhuqian of the Blackguard to lead 50 Blackguard to secretly accompany them. They would absolutely carry out Jin Qinhuang's orders. The Blackguard, without a doubt, belonged to the emperor's dogs. They only obeyed orders. Their execution ability was strong, their means were ruthless, and they killed people like they were scything. The people who originally had small thoughts and wanted to plan something suddenly lost 90% of their enthusiasm. The remaining 10%, if it wasn't that they didn't put Li Hongyuan in their eyes, it was that they were hoping for a fluke. Luo Peishan was an expert in this kind of thing. In any case, it wasn't the first time. Moreover, he wouldn't consider any factors other than the ability to do things. In any case, these people, no matter how they jumped around, they wouldn't be his grandson-in-law's opponent. The ones who were seeking death were themselves. It had nothing to do with him. Luchingdi had several other ministers make additions and quickly decided on the personnel. Finally, the Grand Commander of the Imperial Guards will accompany them. They will be fully responsible for Jin Qinhuang's safety. Someone lit a candle for Luchingdi. Were you sending people to monitor him or to help him unconditionally? The matter was urgent and couldn't be delayed for too long. Otherwise, who knew what kind of incident would happen? Therefore, the preparation time was only 3 days. On the way back to Li Hongyuan's Fu, Jingwan was also dealing with some matters. The 4 people, Si, Gu, and Fu, all asked her to appoint a marriage. Jingwan wasn't surprised. As people who were close to the King of Hell, it wasn't strange for them to have the courage to ask for true love. After she knew that these people weren't Li Hongyuan's people, she also expected this moment. But for people together, one by one, it would give her some buffer time. Why don't we wait for Wang Ye to come back and ask him? If it was an ordinary servant girl, she could decide. But in the end, it was Li Hongyuan's personal servant girl. No matter what, she had to ask him personally. There was no other meaning. It was purely out of respect, that's all. Wang Fei, for such a small matter, just nod your head. Wang Ye won't have any objections to your decision. That was also true. That person regarding these matters didn't care at all. Since it's like this, I won't force it. Call them over for me to take a look. Although the time you've served me is short, it's also fate. Not to say that I'm helping you, but at least I should knock some sense into them so that they'll treat you better in the future. Many thanks, Wang. Jingwan chuckled, there's no need for thanks. In the end, they are Wang Ye's and my people. Although I don't have much ability, at least I have to take good care of the people around me. It's just that you're still young and the marriage isn't urgent. You can take it slowly. You should also hand it over to Meilon Juju and the others. There are many things they don't understand, so you should teach them more. Wang Fei, in fact, there's nothing to hand over. After this month, it's almost done. Moreover, the marriage can't be delayed. Qing Shi's face was red, her hand intentionally or unintentionally placed on her lower abdomen. This kind of thing was really shameful. But he was very happy. Qing Shi was gradually taking care of him. Jingwan was a little stunned. Should she say that this was indeed the Jin Wang Ye style? Quite valiant? Qing Shi looked calm and steady, but the result was that she was pregnant before marriage. Even if it was spread out, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. But in the end, it would affect her reputation. Was it really good? Does Wang Ye know about your matters? Jingwan thought about it. She felt that if a certain someone didn't know, they probably wouldn't have the guts. But as a girl, how could they do this kind of thing for no reason? One was enough, but looking at it, it seemed that all 4 of them. It couldn't be that a certain someone told them to find it, right? Who would have thought that Jingwan accidentally revealed the truth? I know. Alright, I won't ask anymore. Since it's like this, you can prepare for the marriage with peace of mind. If there's anything, I'll let them find you. That's not right. When I didn't know, you quietly handed over the matters in your hands. You've been thinking about getting married for a long time? Jingwan ridiculed. Wang Fei, please forgive us. It's a joyous occasion. What crime? Jingwan sent them away and began to settle accounts with her own maidservants. Turned out that all of them were hiding it from them. In fact, Jingwan's people didn't think of seizing power or anything at the beginning. It was only because they weren't strong enough that they worked hard to learn. Who would have thought that the result would be like this after a month? At this point, what else could be said? Li Hongyuan returned to the prince's residence. Jingwan arrived shortly after. Wan, Imperial Father has ordered me to be an Imperial envoy. I've ordered people to pack up and go to Jiangnan. The matter was too sudden. Jingwan was startled, but then she nodded. All right. Does Wang Ye have any special things that you need to bring? I'll have people prepare them so that we don't miss anything. Special things that I need to bring? Besides you, what else? Li Hongyuan used his hand to intimately rub her cheek. I'm going to. Jingwan was pleasantly surprised. Didn't I already tell you that I have something to do in the next 2 days? Did you forget so quickly? Or do you actually not like it? I like it, of course I like it. Chapter 275. I like it, of course I like it. The joy in Jingwan's eyes was not fake at all. Because of the limitations of her social background, Jingwan was far less restrained than ordinary girls before she got married, even though she was pampered by her grandmother. However, there were still many restrictions and there were very few places she could set foot in. If she did not have her previous life, she probably would not feel anything. Perhaps she would feel regret, but she would not have too much yearning. However, after experiencing the civilization of her previous life, she had been to many places and seen many cultural sceneries. Fortunately, she was able to go to a completely different place. If she could not see it, she was afraid that she would miss it after she died. However, in an instant Jingwan was a little hesitant. Since you are traveling as an imperial envoy, is it okay for me to follow? Since there is a plan, how can there be a problem? Li Hongyuan briefly explained the situation in Jiangnan to Jingwan. Actually, it doesn't matter whether I go or not. It's not difficult to solve the problem. I've taken on this once-in-a-lifetime task as long as I still want to bring you to Jiangnan to play legitimately. I'm a prince and I'm even more special. Even if I leave the capital, I'll just take a stroll in the surrounding areas. If I want to go too far, it's impossible for me to do so without an imperial order. Yuan. Such a man, even if she was bullied from time to time, he was also willing to endure it. His wife didn't have many preferences, but it wasn't easy to satisfy them. Every time he saw her sparkling eyes, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He didn't have such a feeling when everything was under his control. However, while satisfying her, he was also very satisfied. Of course, when it came to things like his wife throwing herself into his arms, he was even more impolite. However, Yuan, the matter in Jiangnan, it was not you who caused it, right? She definitely shouldn't do something like toying with the feudal vassals. She might be a bit special, but she was still more ordinary. She couldn't bear such a sin. In essence, it was all men's fault for causing the downfall of a country. However, they were the source of it. Even if they didn't do anything, they still had to bear a share of the sins that they had committed. What if I say yes? What will Wan do? Li Hongyuan asked seriously. Jingwan looked at him and couldn't tell if he was telling the truth. She frowned and said, if that's the case, then even if I go to hell, I'll be with you. Just don't do it again. Yuan, you've done a lot for me, but I can't do anything for you. I just want you to be well. She couldn't criticize him in the name of righteousness. Li Hongyuan chuckled. Of course it's not true. This matter has always existed. I just got someone to expose it at the right time to get rid of a group of vermin in advance. I pray for the next life with Wan, but it's enough for me to go to hell. You just have to wait for me up there. Jingwan's eyes were slightly wet and her lips moved. She wanted to ask why was he so good to her? She looked forward to the answer, but she was also afraid of the answer. Because this man's kindness to her seemed to have existed from the beginning. It was so inexplicable, how could she not mind? She knew what state she was in now. Because she cared, she minded. It had only been a month and this man had made her fall to this point. Could be imagined how high and how terrible his methods were. Yuan, don't let me down, please don't let me down. Otherwise, I might really go crazy and kill people. I can give in and tolerate everything else, but this is the only thing I can be selfish. Knowing that you're suffering down there, how could I wait up there as if nothing had happened? That kind of anxiety, I'd rather exchange it for physical pain. Perhaps as long as I could see you, I'd be able to smile even if I had to endure the same pain as you. Even though her eyes were filled with tears, Jingwon still smiled. It was probably the first time that Lee Hongyuan heard Jingwon express her feelings so clearly. He was a little surprised, but more than that, he spontaneously felt joy. He clasped the back of Jingwon's head and unceremoniously kissed her. Jingwon naturally didn't refuse, and there was a deeper passion that she didn't have in the past. There was no surprise that the heavenly thunder attracted the earth fire. However, the maidservants were already used to the two of them taking the initiative to retreat when they were together. If they weren't called, they basically wouldn't appear. And Mama Gong, who knew more, was even stricter with them. There were some things that didn't benefit them at all if they heard it. Lee Hongyuan knew that he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop today. He didn't care, outsiders couldn't break into Haitang restaurant, but there was only him and Jingwon here. If he didn't go out, there would always be people who would have a lot of imaginations. He was very clear that once it was revealed that he was going to take Jingwon to Jiangnan, she would definitely receive attention from all sides. At this time it was better to stop. Could be considered the first time that he came to stop. Jingwon's face was flushed and she was a little embarrassed. She knew that now was not the right time. Sure enough, after hanging around a certain someone for so long, she became more and more unbridled and outrageous. Lee Hongyuan didn't tease her. He said something else to let the waves of passion in his body gradually subside. Jingwon told him about the 4 people, Shi, Gu and Fu. It's inconvenient for Qingshi to go out, so let her stay. As for the other 3 people's wedding, let's wait until they come back. No need. The day after tomorrow, all 4 of them will be married off. Lee Hongyuan decided. Jingwon was speechless. That's too rushed. How can 2 days be enough to prepare a wedding? Their wedding has probably been prepared for a long time. The so-called guests are just people in the Fu. Not to mention 2 days, even tonight is enough for them to consummate their marriage. Jingwon couldn't help but want to facepalm. Having this kind of master, they were really unlucky. This isn't a problem with the guests, okay? Although they already have a marriage partner, the 3 books and 6 rites, how can the entire agenda be completed in 1 or 2 days? Don't tell me that the agenda has already been completed, and only the last step is left. Without reporting to Master, do they have the guts to talk about marriage? Since it's Master's decision, all the red tape can naturally be skipped. No one will deny the marriage between them. Everything that Master gives is grace. Lee Hongyuan said matter-of-factly. Fine. Whatever you say. It's just that I've only been married for a month and I've already married off my husband's personal maidservants. Her reputation as a jealous woman was probably going to be tarnished. Although she knew that the 4 maidservants weren't bedwarmers, outsiders didn't know. Slow down. Can't you take it slow? Since we have to do it anyway, why not do it all at once? It's troublesome to do it over and over again. He drank vinegar all day long and was a jealous man. As his wife, she naturally had to clean up all the flowers and plants around him. I can't win against you. It was better to prepare more dowries for the 4 of them. She felt wronged at the wedding, so she could only compensate in other places. Moreover, as long as she wanted to monopolize him, she would have to face this sooner or later. It didn't matter if it was earlier or later. This time I'll do my best to arrange for the waterway to Jiangnan. However, the carriage definitely can't be lacking. You'll feel uncomfortable if you sit in the carriage for too long. This is always a problem. Those people from the Ministry of Works are really useless. I've asked them to modify the carriage, but they still haven't had any good results. This is my own problem. Moreover, the bumpy ride in the carriage isn't just the carriage's problem. Unfortunately, she didn't know the formula for cement. Even if she only knew the general idea, if she gave it to someone to study, there was a 90% chance that they would succeed in the end. The carriage itself was a shock absorber. As long as the wheels were replaced with gum, it would be greatly improved. However, at this moment Jingwon suddenly felt that even if she had lived in a mechanical and electronic civilization, she was actually a piece of trash. For the first time in more than 10 years of life, she began to deny herself. Thinking about it, it was enough. It was said that people with motion sickness had to sit in more carriages and suffer a few more times before they would be fine. Jingwon wondered if she should also try it. Will Su Guifei let you enter the palace? Fu Huang is currently in a fit of anger. How could she do such a stupid thing? Not to mention her, before we leave my brothers won't come. As for the main entourage, those who are a bit more daring will come. In addition, those sisters-in-law of yours will definitely come looking for you. If you don't want to pay attention to them, then refuse them all. In any case, it will only be 2 or 3 days at most. There's no time to see them one by one. Then I'll see them all together. Jingwan smiled. At that time she was afraid that no one would speak in front of her. Offending no one but offending everyone? Li Hongyuan tacitly followed up. At least on the surface no one will say anything. And very Ben Wang's style. Indeed, how many people hated Jin Qinhuang to the point of gnashing their teeth, but in front of him they didn't dare to fart. This isn't marrying a chicken to follow the chicken, marrying a dog to follow the dog. Marrying Jin Qinhuang, one must have the awareness of being the enemy of the whole world. Jingwan faintly said, "This is very good." Wan continued to maintain it. "Wait until the day when Wan doesn't need me and can make everyone angry at you but not dare to say anything. You've cultivated to the peak." Towards a certain someone who always felt good about himself and always boasted shamelessly, Jingwan was now more and more calm, but she didn't want to admit it. Under normal circumstances, isn't it one who creates trouble and the other who cleans up the mess from behind? Then the trouble that I create, Wan, are you sure you can clean it up? You really do know your own limits. Just as Li Hongyuan said, there were indeed people who came to the door, but they didn't know if it was their own intention or their master's instruction. Li Hongyuan gave them face and met them, but the first people who came were 2 great Buddhas, the Imperial Guard's commander and the blackguard Swiqianshi. Their meaning was that they were following the emperor's orders. Because it was the first time they assisted Jin Qinhuang in handling an errand, so that they could come first to listen to Jin Qinhuang's admonition, understand Jin Qinhuang's way of doing things, and cultivate tacit understanding so that they could do their job better. How many people silently cursed that Lu Qingdi guarded against them as if they were thieves, not giving them the slightest chance. But since they had already come to the door, naturally it wouldn't be so simple. They turned their heads and left, expressing their lack of confidence, and could only say a bunch of words to save face, something like they would do their best to complete the errand, as long as they would listen to Jin Qinhuang's orders. When the time comes, if Jin Qinhuang had any matters, he would just have to instruct and so on. Li Hongyuan appeared to be quite patient. While drinking tea, he patiently listened to them finish speaking, then nodded and said that so-and-so Darren's words, he would remember them. Since they were so loyal to the emperor and Qi Yuan, he definitely wouldn't disappoint their good intentions. What they said today, in the future in Jiangnan, he would definitely fulfill them. What was called moving a stone to smash one's own foot, this was it. The more words that were said, the more miserable it would be when the time came. If there was even the slightest bit of irresponsibility at that time, your loyalty would be doubted. If you said 10 sentences and did 9 sentences well, if there was one sentence that was not done, you would be questioned boasting, arrogant and conceited. And if you didn't say a sentence but did something beautifully, you would probably be praised wholeheartedly, well from the beginning to the end, attentively and carefully, having self-awareness. As the saying goes, they were all in the same line of work. Others had already gone to report to the peak. If you didn't go, wouldn't it be bad? And after receiving Jin Qinhuang's inhumane threat, they naturally wouldn't tell others about the situation. Everyone was the same, only then would they be able to mentally balance out. Therefore, one after another they went to Jin Qinhuang Fu. Those who didn't have any thoughts would go in groups of 2 or even 3. Those who had selfish motives would face the 3 great Buddhas alone, with beads of sweat dripping down their hair and 2 legs trembling. Most likely they were all just talking about face. The result, was naturally the same. Since the opening of Jin Qinhuang Fu, it was the first time that so many court officials had come to visit one after another. It was very lively. The great commander of the Imperial Guards, Swiqianshi of the blackguard, one was a standard 3rd rank, the other was a standard 4th rank. Both of them could be considered young and promising, but when Li Hongyuan received the court officials, they maintained silence from beginning to end. Looking at his simple and crude but extremely effective way of doing things, they didn't. Yu Zhongqing, on the other hand, didn't have any thoughts. After all, he had already pledged allegiance to him. When there were orders, he would do as he was told. When there weren't, he would do his own thing. As for Swiqianshi of the blackguard, this person's identity was actually a bit special. In the blackguard, although there was a standard third-rank commander and a lower third-rank commander above him, his status was on the same level as them. Sometimes his words were more effective than the two above him. This was because he was actually Lu Qingdi's adopted son, and was even bestowed with the surname Li by Lu Qingdi. This person didn't look like he was over the top, and seemed to be about the same age as Li Hongyuan. In fact, he was only 2 years younger than Yu Zhongqing, but his face was relatively tender. However, those who knew this person basically didn't dare to look down on him. His face was sharp and there was a hint of killing intent. It wasn't that there weren't any princes who wanted to recruit him, but they didn't dare to make a move. Whether or not they succeeded in recruiting Yu Zhongqing, there wouldn't be any harm. And because he didn't hold back in front of Lu Qingdi, no one dared to speak lightly. Li Suyen was secretly probing Li Hongyuan. Was Li Hongyuan completely unaware? Of course not. His understanding of Li Suyen was beyond others. This person in Li Hongyuan's eyes was actually very interesting. In everyone's eyes he was absolutely loyal to Lu Qingdi, but in fact he wasn't. Li Hongyuan never thought of recruiting this person because the result would be the same. In the previous life, after Li Hongyuan ascended the throne, he understood this person and promoted him to the commander of the blackguard. He was a tyrant and countless families were confiscated and destroyed, and Li Suyen was the executor. The two entered Jin Qin Wangfu and didn't seem to be prepared to leave. Li Hongyuan was too lazy to care about them, and didn't even let people arrange a place for them to stay. Secondly, these two people were used to going through wind and rain. Even if they were going to Jiangnan, they wouldn't prepare a lot of things, so it didn't matter where they stayed. Li Hongyuan didn't care, but Eunuch Mu couldn't pretend that he didn't know. Without saying anything, he went to report to the Wangfei and asked for the Wangfei's instructions. Yu Zhongqing didn't say anything, but Jingwan naturally knew. Zhuqian of the blackguard? Thinking of last year's court examination, the 3 people who passed the Jinshi examination paraded through the streets on horseback, as if this person was the one holding the line. Of course, the premise was that the person in this position hadn't been changed. Is it the same person as last year? Eunuch Mu didn't understand, but he still answered truthfully. This Li Daren was appointed as the Zhuqian of the blackguard 2 years ago. Although they only met once, Jingwan still had some impression. But, you said that his surname is Li and he's a member of the royal family? Replying to the Wangfei, no, Li Daren is actually the emperor's adopted son. Jingwan nodded. Although the emperor didn't take in many adopted sons, it wasn't like there weren't any. Tell me, what does the blackguard do? Eunuch Mu slightly hesitated. The blackguard is in charge of the prison, has the power to patrol and arrest, and has the discipline department, which is responsible for investigation, arrest, interrogation and other matters. Unlike the Ministry of Justice, they are only responsible for relatively special matters, and directly report to the emperor. It was really similar to the brocade guards, but Jingwan had never heard of the blackguard's prestige before. She didn't think that it was far from the extent that the mention of black would cause her face to change. Since they may have to stay in the Fu, you can arrange the accommodations as you see fit. Just treat them as 2 ordinary guests in the Fu. Don't neglect them and don't be overly attentive. Just treat them as normal. In the entire Jinqing Wangfu, there were only 2 places that had secrets: the study room and the Begonia elegant residence. And the so-called secrets inside, those who didn't know, simply couldn't understand. Once they got their hands on it, they might throw it away as useless things. Yes. Then this servant will go and have people prepare? I have one more thing here. The day after tomorrow, Si, Gu and Fu will get married. Inform the prefectural magistrate to make preparations. All the expenses will be taken from the Fu. Although the time is a little short, it's better to have a lively ceremony. When she said this to Mu and Jingwan could only try to be as calm as possible. After all, it was really not proper. However, Eunuch Mu was calmer than Jingwan, and he didn't even feel that something was wrong. The 4 sisters are lucky to have the princess to take care of them. Sure enough, like master like servant. The thoughts of the living king of hell had a profound effect on the people below. Jingwan had seen the future husbands of the 4 sisters before. One was a gardener and 3 guards, which was really a little unexpected. However, through a simple understanding, these people were still good in all aspects. In addition, they all worked for the Jinqing Wangfu, so there was nothing to be worried about. However, she just moved her lips. How could she take care of them? You flattered her as soon as you opened your mouth. Did you really deserve to be the first lackey of the living king of hell? Hey, don't talk nonsense here. Do it quickly. Yes, 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 this servant will go right away. Eunuch Mu became more flattering. But his flattery was actually not annoying. Because she didn't hide it at all. The news that Li Hongyuan's 4 personal maids were married off by Jingwan was like a gust of wind, which wrinkled the calm lake. Naturally, there were different opinions. More than 90% of the people didn't have good words. The rest thought that Jingwan's behavior was understandable. But after all, she was young and impetuous. It made people feel that she had lost her mind and done something stupid. Originally, she looked like a generous and calm girl. At this moment, Prince Jin was going to Jiangnan on an errand. At this time she hurriedly married his personal maids. Although she stopped him from taking the beauties with him, the result was more harm than good. Such a hasty marriage made the married maids complain. If they loved Prince Jin, they would resent him even more. As for the person who married them, he was forced to take on the master's broken shoes. It would be strange if he felt comfortable in his heart. All of them were dissatisfied with the female master. In the future, when he managed the prince's mansion, there would inevitably be all kinds of troubles. Moreover, there were so many beauties in Jiangnan. If he didn't take any of them with him, he might bring a group of beauties back. Those who were worried about her but didn't know the inside story were naturally a little anxious. Including Great Elder Princess, they couldn't wait to pull Jingwan over and reprimand her. No matter what others said, Prince Jin's mansion was bustling with noise and excitement. The things used were just like those used by many officials' families. Seeing this, many servants in the mansion were envious. Even if they thought that the princess made the compensation because of a guilty conscience, it couldn't reduce their jealousy in their hearts. The 4 bridegrooms more or less all had family members present. Being praised and insulted by others, it was indescribably unpleasant. Even though their own children swore that the person they were marrying was absolutely pure and had nothing to do with the prince, the stifling feeling in their hearts was still difficult to dispel. In the end, after being repeatedly persuaded, they happily accepted their master's good intentions. That was the most important thing. Then, looking at the generous rewards that both the man and woman received, there were many who were righteous and confident. No matter what kind of rumors and slanders there were inside and outside the mansion, Jingwan was not affected at all. She even asked people to treat those words as interesting things to tell her. It was just the beginning. If it was really so easy to be influenced, how could they talk about being a couple for a lifetime? Jingwan didn't answer the invitation of her sisters-in-law. Instead, she invited them. Seeing that Jingwan was still glowing and smiling, the several princesses really didn't know what to say. It should be known that this time it was not as simple as the person who sent them the courtesans last time. At that time they could barely find an excuse, but this time they couldn't defend themselves. After doing this kind of thing, she could still meet people openly without any change in her expression. She was not afraid of others talking about her. It really made people envious and jealous. They also wanted to deal with their husbands' concubines so neatly. Unfortunately, they couldn't. However, when they saw Jin Qingwang's huge amount of luggage, they were collectively speechless. Was he preparing to settle down in Jiangnan and not come back, or what? You're a big man, do you need to be so particular about it? His Majesty already said that you can eat, drink and play as you please. Are you still afraid that you won't be able to live comfortably over there? These things naturally didn't belong to Li Hongyuan. More than 90% of them belonged to Jingwan. However, he really wasn't wrongly accused. According to Jingwan's idea, he could casually bring some and then bring enough money. Jiangnan was a land of wealth. There wasn't anything to eat or wear. If it wasn't to maintain the dignity of the Wangfu, she even wanted to bring money. As a result, Li Hongyuan's face turned stiff and he rejected it. For a man who threw the best things on his wife, those things really didn't enter his eyes. Even if there was something that he liked, he would just buy it when the time came. Jingwan was extremely speechless. However, for this kind of insignificant matter, if he was unyielding, she could only compromise in the end. Moreover, on this matter, the people who served her all stood on Wang Ye's side. She was all alone. Even when they reached the final place of farewell, they didn't see Jingwan coming down from the carriage. Everyone thought that Jin Qinhuang Fei was really deeply affectionate towards Jin Qinhuang. It wasn't easy for them to persuade, so they naturally targeted Luo Peishan, this biological grandfather. However, this old fox stroked his beard unperturbed and didn't say a word. Jin Qin ordered to speed up and the entire procession started to run. Not a single shadow came down from his carriage. The people who stayed behind, "Are you sure that Jin Qin Fei is in the carriage?" Someone asked, puzzled. "Naturally, I'm sure." "Then the close relative Wang Fei is going to Jiangnan with Jin Qin." The group was in a mess. What was this? When a man went on an errand as a wife, she didn't stay behind to take care of the family and followed along. What was this? Even if it was a general guarding the borders, he would at most bring a concubine to serve by his side. How could a dignified Wang Fei be so improper? Luo Darren doesn't want to say anything? Someone bombarded Luo Peishan. A married lady is like spilled water. She is now Jin Qin Fei. This official has to greet her. What do you want this official to say? Luo Peishan brushed his sleeves and said. So reasonable. So to say Luo Darren already knew about this matter? If this official says that I know, you will definitely say that it is indeed so. If this official says that I don't know, you will definitely not believe it. Then what do you want this official to say? This official still has matters to attend to and will return first. Everyone, please do as you wish. Luo Peishan elegantly got on his own carriage and left. Even if he was hopping mad, there was nothing he could do. Just as Luo Peishan said, he couldn't manage Jin Qin Fei right now. Everyone go back. Jin Qin Fei brought it himself. His Majesty nodded in agreement. We don't need to meddle in other people's business. That's right. The matter is already a foregone conclusion. We can't chase Jin Qin Fei back. Let's go. Jin Qin Fei's agreement was inevitable, but when did His Majesty agree? Those who didn't understand were given a supercilious look. Idiot. Wasn't Lu Qingdi's words obvious? If Jin Qin Fei was happy as long as he didn't go overboard, he could do anything. It was just taking his wife to tour Jiangnan. Compared to finding trouble for others, it was nothing. On the other hand, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Things that didn't work with the living king of hell could be done through foreign's diplomacy. Starting with Jin Qin Fei, they might achieve unexpected results. Jin Qin Fei wasn't soft-hearted towards others. How could he take care of his own wife? Bringing her along was enough to show how much he valued her. Thinking through this point, many people's minds became active again. Sure enough, when Lu Qingdi knew about the good deed Li Hongyuan did, he just waved his hand and didn't say anything. Only, those people who were lining up to have a heart-to-heart talk with Jingwan didn't know what kind of expression they should show. This person wasn't in the capital, what was there to talk about? Those who could figure it out naturally waved their hands and let it go. Those who couldn't figure it out felt that they had been ruthlessly played and were furious. Thinking about the possible reactions of those people, Jingwan was actually quite happy. Leaning in Li Hongyuan's arms, she laughed cheerfully. Just this little thing can make you this happy? If you can always laugh, that would be good. Jingwan poked him. Don't say such a depressing thing now. People who have never fainted in a carriage don't know how uncomfortable it is. Actually, I have a way, maybe it can make Wan not feel uncomfortable, but also make the whole journey comfortable. Li Hongyuan said with a deeper meaning. What is it? Jingwan looked up at him with interest, only to see his undisguised gaze. How could she not know what he wanted to do? She unhappily patted him. Don't even think about it. This carriage was surrounded by experts with sharp ears and eyes. It was fine if she was shameless in front of her own people, but in front of outsiders, even if she was beaten to death, she wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to do such an extremely shameful thing as having sex in the carriage. Li Hongyuan pulled her into his arms, lowered his voice and laughed softly in her ear. Wan doesn't have to make a sound. I've had people reinforce this carriage so when it's moving no one will be able to see it from outside. Does Wan really not want to try it? Maybe it really won't be uncomfortable at all. Shut up. Jingwan said with some embarrassment. Alright Wan, whatever you say. However, as long as Wan needs it, this husband is always at your service. Jingwan impolitely rolled her eyes at him. Even if she felt uncomfortable, she would never do such a thing. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows non-committally. When the time came, it would be good if she could really refuse. Li Hongyuan was still very confident about this, so he was not in a hurry now. Because there were many people around, Li Hongyuan didn't say anything important to Jingwan. He just leaned on the bed and whispered in her ear. The outside of this carriage still didn't exceed the standard of a prince's carriage, but the inside was different. It was simply a small inner room. Although it was small, it had all the essentials. According to Jingwan, it was a 100% caravan, and it was a luxurious and enhanced version. It strived to be comfortable and luxurious. As time passed, Jingwan began to feel a little uncomfortable. She wanted to sleep but couldn't. Li Hongyuan knew that she felt uncomfortable, but it was the first time he felt it so close. Her healthy and rosy face turned pale, just like a healthy person who was gradually getting sick. Li Hongyuan's heart ached for her. He became irritable and didn't have the mood to joke. He just wanted to relieve her discomfort. Li Hongyuan held her face and kissed her without hesitation. After a short struggle, Jingwan began to cater to him. He knew that Jingwan was thin-skinned and he didn't want a group of men to hear Jingwan's embarrassing moans. Even if he didn't kiss her, he would let Jingwan bite something. Jingwan didn't seem to forget the people outside. He seemed to be very tolerant. Her body was tense and she was inexplicably excited. Li Hongyuan felt the change in her and his irritable mood disappeared. He enjoyed this different kind of joy. Occasionally he would tease Jingwan. "Are you still uncomfortable? Are you very comfortable?" Jingwan's face turned red, but she couldn't scold him. Probably because they didn't know what day it was when they stopped, the carriage had also stopped. She didn't know how long they had been listening. Jingwan felt that she didn't have the face to see people. She wasn't sure that she didn't make a sound on the way. At the front of the carriage there was a light knock on the door used to separate them. Gong Mama's voice came. "Wang Yi, is Wang Fei better? We've arrived at the post station. Do you want to rest before continuing?" "Wait a moment. Send in some warm water." "Yes." Gong Mama brought in 2 servant girls. Li Hongyuan quickly came out dressed neatly. No one could tell what had happened. But after being in the carriage for so long, his clothes were not messy at all. Unless he had been sitting upright the whole time. But was the king of hell that kind of person? So, if it was too tidy it would be more conspicuous. Gong Mama brought the servant girls to help Jingwan freshen up. She whispered a few words to her, appeasing Jingwan's heart. In fact, it hadn't been long since they stopped and there really wasn't any movement. It was only because they were familiar with it that they found some clues. Other people shouldn't know. Previously they had told them that their Wang Fei would be uncomfortable sitting in the carriage for a long time. In fact, it wasn't just Jingwan's problem. Along the way, Jingwan didn't let them stop and no one could point out anything. Jingwan heaved a sigh of relief. However, looking at Jingwan's current complexion, Gong Mama and the others were actually very happy. This was more comfortable than the sickly Wang Fei. Jin Qin Wang wanted to rest for an hour. No one could say anything. Even if they knew that they were in a hurry, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. Jingwan was carried down by Li Hongyuan later. Her cloak was tightly covered. And the rooms in the post station had been changed thoroughly by the servant girls. Looking at the familiar things, this was the reason why a certain someone had to bring so many things. It was just resting for an hour. Was there a need to go through so much trouble? Was it to make some food and also to bring their own ingredients? Jingwan wasn't too sure. In a certain carriage, was there still ice to ensure the freshness of the vegetables and fruits? In fact, Jingwan later confirmed her thoughts. However, regarding these matters, a certain someone had always been obstinate. No matter how much she said, it was all in vain. Therefore, she could only take care of other people's emotions as much as possible, so that they would have as little complaints as possible. This was also human nature. Thus, a group of mortals enjoyed things that they couldn't even think of during the arduous journey. People in the Wangfu clearly expressed that this was Wang Fei's order. Thinking about Jin Qin Wang, he really didn't know how to conduct himself, so there was no need to doubt this point. In their hearts, it was not good to think about Jingwan anymore. The willful one was obviously Jin Qin Wang. Seeing that Jingwan had inadvertently bought people's hearts, Li Hongyuan indifferently looked at them. Each and every one of them should be deeply grateful to Wanwan. After an hour, they quickly packed their things and prepared to leave. Jingwan inadvertently turned her head and saw some abandoned disposable things. Li Hongyuan ordered people to burn them. The things that his wife had used were not things that other people could use. Jingwan was completely powerless. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. After that, the journey was relatively smooth. When they got on the boat, they sped up and didn't slow down the overall time. Chapter 276. All in all, in just a few days, everyone more or less had an understanding. Jin Qin Wang Fei was really a good person. How could she marry such a slag like Jin Qin Wang? Those who had this thought not only the people from other factions but also Jin Qinhuang's people. Jin Qinhuang's ability was beyond doubt. Those who had seen it all thought that he was the most suitable heir to the throne. However, with such a strong master, you might not be able to keep up with his thinking speed. Once your reaction was slow, he would look at you as if you were an idiot, making you feel ashamed and want to die. At one point you would doubt your previous life. And Li Hongyuan's nature was cold and ruthless, without any mercy, and his methods were bloody. In fact, those who worked for him as time passed, their understanding of him deepened and they all had faint worries in their hearts. It was just that no one dared to easily break this layer of worry. Perhaps they were deceiving themselves and didn't want to admit it. After having a female master, knowing her temperament, understanding her character, and more importantly, knowing that the master cared about her and was able to listen to her advice, there was really nothing more joyous than this. Under normal circumstances, a woman's influence on the emperor was too great. This was absolutely not what the officials wanted to see. However, if the emperor had extraordinary ability, but was essentially a tyrant, and this woman could influence the emperor's thoughts and even make decisions, she was fundamentally righteous and could distinguish right from wrong. Then this kind of combination was actually a happy sight. Along the way, those who worked for Li Hongyuan, whether it was in the open or in the dark, saw everything and were gratified. The hidden worries in their hearts also gradually faded, until they completely disappeared. Naturally, they gave Jingwan more respect from their hearts. At the same time, it also imperceptibly influenced other people's view of Jingwan. As for the point that Jin Qinhuang Fei was a jealous woman, she did those things, but it didn't affect her relationship with Jin Qinhuang. Just thinking about it, one should know that this wasn't Jin Qinhuang Fei's problem alone. Without Jin Qinhuang Fei's connivance, how could Jin Qinhuang Fei as his wife be so unscrupulous? Not to mention that a jealous empress would affect the emperor's children. If the empress was unhappy and continued to tie the emperor down, then there was no need to talk about the future. The emperor himself would collapse the country first, then what was the use of having more children? It was said that the more children one had, the more blessings one would have. But in reality, with so many sons, how many of them would be able to live a life full of blessings, peace and happiness? It was clearly a case of brothers quarreling and falling apart. More of them were fighting to the death. 10 dozen good-for-nothings who only cared about benefits couldn't even compare to an outstanding successor. A rational person would believe that quality was more important than quantity, even if it was a son. Well, it was still too early to talk about this now. After all, these variables could exist at any time. It was useless to think too much about it. The most important thing was what was in front of him. Li Hongyuan couldn't help but smile when he saw the changes in the people around him. Some people's worries weren't groundless. He was well aware of his current nature. Without Jingwan, there was a 90% chance that he would act recklessly and, as Master Liaochen had said, cause misery and suffering to the people. He left behind a paradise only because she was in this land. Right now, he was laying the groundwork bit by bit to increase her leverage and push her to the highest position so that Wan's influence would grow. In the future, when he ascended to the throne, the court officials wouldn't urge him to expand the harem and have more children. Instead, they would do the opposite and urge him to favor only one woman. If he failed a woman like the Empress, the heavens would not tolerate it. Regardless of whether it was out of sincerity or because they were worried that he would act recklessly without restraints, as long as he could reach this point for him, it might be a greater achievement than creating a golden age. The mighty fleet moved forward on the canal. Everywhere it passed, all the boats moved aside. Li Hongyuan acted like a tyrant. There was no need to talk about keeping a low profile or investigating in secret. Everywhere he went, it was clear to everyone that he, Li Hongyuan, the current Qinhuang, the imperial envoy appointed by the emperor, had arrived. Some people wanted to ask with such great fanfare what could they find. They were afraid that all the evidence of their crimes had been covered up. If they colluded with each other, they would return empty-handed. Someone had given him advice, but Li Hongyuan didn't listen at all and continued to do as he pleased. Originally, the most luxurious boat in the fleet was his and Jingwan's. The rest of the people except for Yu Zhongqing and Li Xiyan were all from Jin Qinhuang Fu. There were originally a lot of people, but after they were placed on the boat, it was actually very empty. As for whether the other people on the boat would be pitifully squeezed together, that was not within his scope of concern. As the main entourage, if they wanted to board the boat to talk to him, they had to obtain his consent. If he was tired of hearing it, he would forbid them from boarding the boat. Thus, the others could only stand on another boat and watch Li Hongyuan standing at the highest point, so free and easy and comfortable. They could only silently cry in the wind. Therefore, Jin Qinhuang's temper became better. That was definitely an illusion. It was only because Jin Qinhuang Fei was there as a buffer, so he didn't find fault. "Uncle, you're really a good person, ah. Then can you help a bit?" But it was very embarrassing. Jingwan couldn't hear their inner voices. Moreover, on official matters, she believed that he must have a plan and had a card up his sleeve. Therefore, no matter what he did now, she wouldn't say anything. Instead, she was full of character and had people prepare iron plates for barbecue. On a sunny day, the wind was blowing in their faces. On the deck, a specially built iron plate barbecue rack was set up. All kinds of food were skewered and piled into a small mountain. During the barbecue process, the aroma spread and the gluttonous worms in their stomachs became active. When they were in Qi and Fu, Mei Lan, Ju Mei, 4 people's barbecue skills had been trained to be excellent. In addition, Hei Mei and Bai Xiao, who were born with full skills in this aspect, could learn it after learning it once. Moreover, the cooks brought out from the Wang Fu weren't just for show. For them, this thing didn't require any skill. Jingwan only needed to open her mouth and wait to eat. Jingwan's cooking skills weren't very good, but she thought that barbecue was pretty good. She intended to let her husband have a taste of her cooking. Considering that a certain someone was a carnivore, Jingwan didn't make things difficult for him this time. She barbecued a few skewers of whole meat and sent them to Li Hongyuan. "Try it." With a little hope. After all, a certain someone's mouth was so picky. Who knew if the food she made could be eaten by him? Li Hongyuan found it funny. Everyone, including his wife, thought that he was the most delicate and didn't use anything that wasn't the best. Li Hongyuan took a bite from Jingwan's hand and tasted it carefully. "It tastes good." Jingwan smiled happily. It was so sincere and natural. Just because of such a small matter, Jingwan gradually became more humane to some extent. In the past, she was ruled by reason most of the time. But after marrying Li Hongyuan, there weren't many times when she needed to be calm and rational. Wanwan made it. "Even if it's poison, your husband will still eat it." Li Hongyuan's sweet words seemed to be a little ineffective at this moment, because Jingwan's face immediately fell. "So, it's because the person who made it makes you think it tastes good and not because it itself makes you think it's good? So, the things I make are still difficult for people to eat?" Li Hongyuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His little sweetheart was actually fussing about this. She was grasping the wrong point. Li Hongyuan took the skewer from her hand and pinched her face. "It's not that bad. In fact, the taste is really good. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself." With that said, he took the skewer and ate it unhurriedly. Jingwan slapped his hand away. "You're not allowed to pinch my face. I'm not a child. I'll try it." After tasting it, Jingwan was satisfied and unceremoniously stuffed everything in her hand to Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed with ridicule. "Say that you're not a child, don't be so childish, ah." His wife was spoiled to the point that her mind regressed. As a man who pampered his wife, this was definitely a great achievement, ah. People who were used to the two people getting along with each other were used to this scene. For people who met for the first time, such as Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen, although they still had a paralyzed face, their hearts were somewhat shocked. This was poles apart from the Jin Qinhuang they were familiar with. If Jin Qinhuang's temperament had always been like this, other things were hard to say, but one thing was certain. That was, the number of women in Jin Qinhuang Fu was definitely not in the minority. Jingwan reached out and secretly poked Li Hongyuan's arm, giving the two door gods a meaningful look. Anyone who could distract his wife in Li Hongyuan's eyes was an enemy. His eyes darkened, but it wasn't good to continue looking for nourishment from his wife. Playing around with trivial matters, sooner or later his wife would no longer fall for this. Then he could only let others bear it. Turning back, "You guys also eat a bit." The two men inexplicably felt a little chilly. Many thanks to Wang Ye. Originally, there were several barbecue grills prepared. Now it was enough for the servant girls to use one just to serve Jingwan and Li Hongyuan. Barbecue was, in essence, just for fun. Now perhaps it could add a novelty. Everyone's appetite was not bad. Li Hongyuan also let people get good wine. The taste was really wonderful. With outsiders present, Li Hongyuan didn't pull Jingwan to be lovey-dovey. He lazily half-leaned on the recliner and let Yu Zhongqing and Li Xian sit down, casually chatting. There was a lot of cooked food on the tray at hand. The skewers left behind would be quickly taken away, but they didn't know how much had been eaten. Li Xian, how many black-clothed guards did you bring out? They were still chatting a moment ago, but Li Hongyuan's last sentence was abrupt. Li Xian subconsciously wanted to blurt out, but inadvertently saw Li Hongyuan's lazy but ruthless eyes looking at him from the corner of his eyes. He paused, answering Wang Ya. 100 people. Yu Zhongqing's hand movements paused. That day in the imperial court the emperor clearly said 50 people, but the actual number was doubled. What was the meaning of this? Speaking of the black-clothed guards, Li Xian brought 50 people on the surface, but this was only half of the number. Even Yu Zhongqing didn't see all of them. Li Hongyuan's expression didn't change at all. He just divided the extra 50 people into groups of 5 and sent them to 10 different places. It was obviously an important matter, but he seemed to be saying that the weather was good today. Li Xian's task was to assist Li Hongyuan. He didn't need to have his own ideas. He only needed to carry out orders unconditionally. Yes. At this moment, people who were hiding in unknown places left their groups to carry out their tasks. These people were good at reconnaissance, arrest, and interrogation. This time they were secretly collecting information. However, there must be something in common, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Even if it was difficult, they had to do their best to complete it, and it had to be perfect. After completing such a small task, Li Hongyuan seemed to have lost his interest. After all, it wasn't mealtime yet, so his stomach wasn't that hungry. These people naturally didn't have the habit of overeating. They just continued to drink and occasionally ate a little as a side dish. They didn't want to eat here, but the people on the surrounding boats were in pain. The smell was too fragrant, but they could only smell it. They couldn't see nor eat it. It couldn't be helped. The King of Hell's boat was the tallest and largest. The closer they were, the less they could see the situation on the deck. Of course, it wasn't only the people who were attracted by it. Seeing that they were about to arrive at Kaming Prefecture, more and more boats gathered on the canal. Kaming Prefecture was a very important prefecture before entering Jiangnan. At the same time, it was also the capital of Tongzhou County. It could be said that it had already entered the boundary of the wooden target this time. This place wasn't within the scope of investigation. However, if Li Hongyuan went crazy and started from here, he wouldn't be able to clean himself up. Therefore, this place was not only prosperous but also on the main road. It was developed not only by water but also by land. It was obvious that it was absolutely not to be underestimated. Master, there's still an hour before we reach Kaming Prefecture. An E stepped forward and said in a low voice. Stop the fleet at Kaming Ferry. After lunch, wait for me to take a nap before disembarking. Li Hongyuan said in a light voice. Yes. For the many officials waiting at the ferry to light candles, it would be 2.5 hours later. Those were officials of second rank and below. What governor, administrator, inspector and so on. Knowing that the prince had graced them with his presence, and because of his identity as the imperial envoy, no one dared to neglect him. Moreover, because this time's matter was too big, they had already received the news long ago. And this imperial envoy was naturally the first person they paid attention to. There was no need for them to inquire. The capital had already sent a list of all the key personnel over at top speed. Their temperament and preferences were all explained. Among these people there were naturally people they were familiar with. These were all not important. As the imperial envoy, Jin Qinhuang had a few pages of introduction to him. Seeing this lord's great achievements, how many people's foreheads were dripping with sweat. And those who were familiar with Li Hongyuan were almost paralyzed. Then, after confirming that they didn't commit any crimes, they slightly breathed a sigh of relief. But they were still on tenterhooks. This person had never played his cards according to common sense. Who knew whether or not he would become the fish in the moat that would be affected by the fire at the city gates? All kinds of explanations were exchanged. No matter if they were political enemies or allies, they all complained incessantly. Why did His Majesty pick this person? Was there no one else in the imperial court? And for those who didn't know, the more they understood, the more they felt that it was strange. Was that a ferocious bird or beast? Or did he have 3 heads and 6 arms? They hadn't seen him yet, but the people who usually had the virtue of being the lord and lousy were so scared that they trembled like quails. Without a doubt, their own legs and stomachs also trembled. The reputation of the living king of hell was simply demonized. So much so that for a time they neglected the part about Jingwan. Of course, it could also be that Jingwan was a female. Even if they wanted to use roundabout tactics, it wasn't good to write down her temperament and preferences too clearly. Otherwise, if the living king of hell knew about it, they would be torn apart one by one. In addition, to a certain extent, Jin Qinhuang also specialized in dealing with debauches. Because no matter what kind of debauchee you were in front of him, you had to lie down on your stomach. Based on this point, these Darren didn't lack in exhortations to their own evil creatures. During Jin Qinhuang's stay, they must not cause trouble. It would be best if they didn't even leave the door. Otherwise, if they offended him, no one could save them. It must be known that the second generation of these places were even more lawless than the princes in the capital. They didn't care much about their own father's words. Only when they really fell into Li Hongyuan's hands, each and every one of them regretted until their intestines turned green. Only then did they know that compared to this one they were actually nothing. Because the momentum was too great, the entire ferry was cleared. The common people of Kai Ming Fu all knew that something big was going to happen today and stood on their tiptoes from afar, craning their necks to watch. When the fleet arrived at the ferry, there was no need for any special explanation. All the officials knew that the main character had arrived. At first glance, they knew that it wasn't a ship that ordinary people could use. 3 floors, luxurious and imposing. The edge of each deck was densely packed with majestic guards armed with swords. Just by feeling, they knew that those weren't just for show, but had really seen blood. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion that this was indeed Jin Qinhuang's style. Obviously, they had never seen Jin Qinhuang's style before. The ships at the sides spontaneously and consciously moved to the sides, emptying the middle position. The big ship steadily stopped. As early as when they saw the fleet, the officials on the shore quieted down. As they approached, they lowered their eyes and bowed their heads, putting on a respectful attitude, respectfully welcoming Jin Qinhuang's arrival. It was just that it had been almost a quarter of an hour and they still didn't see the slightest movement. They couldn't help but quietly raise their heads. As a result, the same as when the ship stopped, it was still the same now. They couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What was going on? This main ship didn't move, the other ships naturally didn't dare to act blindly without thinking, and they were also at a loss. This wait lasted for 2 seconds. These people were also pampered and pampered. Adding that it was already lunchtime, their bodies seemed to be somewhat swaying. In the end, they couldn't bear it and prepared to send someone to ask. The person who received the order secretly cursed his bad luck, but he had to bite the bullet. The people on the ship couldn't be provoked, and these people also couldn't be provoked. However, when that person dawdled forward, there was a movement on the ship first. The wooden plank to disembark the ship was quickly set up. A man who was missing an important part walked down and stood arrogantly in front of everyone. His voice was quite sharp as he opened. Darren, Master is currently having lunch and will take a nap later. Master's intention is, if you are impatient from waiting, you can go back first. This kind of trivial matter, Master said that he won't bother with you. Finished speaking, Mu Gonggong turned and walked away. These people's faces were called wonderful. This was clearly giving them a show of strength. Even if he was a Qinhuang, wasn't this a bit too much? Did he really think that they didn't have a temper? Well, so what if they had a temper? Didn't they still have to endure it? Go back? This kind of face talk was over. If the main character didn't come down, they could only wait with an empty stomach. Castrated dog. Someone cursed at Mu Gonggong's back. Since they couldn't scold Jin Qinhuang, they naturally took their anger out on others. Mu Gonggong's attitude was really infuriating. He was just a lackey, yet he dared to speak to them like this. It was simply, even if he was a dog, he was Jin Qinhuang's dog. He was a dog that relied on its master's power. You people who were usually high up in the air, other than using your glib tongue, really couldn't do anything to him. Mu Gonggong was ordered to draw hatred. People like him had a master by his side. Without a master's order, they really didn't dare to act casually. Speaking of which, it wasn't only them who suffered, the people accompanying them were also the same. Previously, their sense of smell had been ruthlessly poisoned. They swallowed their saliva as they endured. They thought that when they reached Kai Ming Fu and got off the ship, they would have a good meal and soon forget this kind of torture. As a result, even though they were clearly on the shore, they still had to continue squatting on the ship to gnaw on dry food and drink plain water. At the same time, they couldn't help but think about how delicious Jin Qinhuang's table was. The more they thought about it, the harder it was to swallow. They clearly wanted to restrain themselves from thinking about it, but they couldn't do it. Was there still justice? Jingwan, who was sitting next to Li Hongyuan, also thought the same. You say, how bored were you to do this kind of thing? Li Hongyuan picked up some food and placed it in her bowl. Unconcerned, he opened his mouth. Presumably, along the way, the reputation of the living king of Helk will become more and more well known. Naturally, I have to let them know that this is not just a name but also in reality. Let them be tense at all times. If they relax, it will be more difficult for me. Could he not use this kind of tone and say such infuriating words? At this time, Jingwan also didn't get involved. What she should do on a normal day, she should do it now. Her purpose for coming out was to play. Li Hongyuan did what he said. He hugged Jingwan and took a comfortable afternoon nap. Only then did he give the order to prepare to get off the ship. And the officials on the shore even felt that they were about to ascend to heaven. Of course, this was definitely an illusion. They finally received the confirmation that Jin Qinhuang was going to get off the ship. The people on the other ships wiped their foreheads and quickly got off the ship in an orderly manner. They stood at the side of the empty space and respectfully welcomed him together with the others. The imperial bodyguards on the big ship were divided into 2 rows. They calmly and silently got off the ship and lined up on the shore on both sides. The long-awaited Jin Qinhuang finally appeared. Although it was disrespectful to look at him directly at this time, but with so many people, probably no one would notice if they secretly took a glance. But there were too many people who thought this way. Therefore, in Li Hongyuan's eyes, all the officials of Kai Ming Fu appeared shifty. Li Hongyuan was dissatisfied with these people. And because of that glance, these people were shocked. They seemed to have just remembered that the information also said that Jin Qinhuang was the most handsome man in the capital. Almost all of them ignored this. Although the faces of the officials of Qiyuan also needed to be proper, but this was enough. A big man, what face did they care about? However, after seeing Li Hongyuan, they finally understood what the concept of the most handsome man was and how graceful he was. Although he wasn't wearing the imperial robe of a prince, he wore a jade crown on his head, a black brocade robe with dark patterns and golden thread at the edges. His handsome face, cold eyes, noble, dignified, and aloof. This kind of person occupied all the glory and favor. He was born to be in a superior position. Even if they knew of his fierce reputation, it was difficult to have a bad impression at the first moment. But the woman beside him was only a step behind. She was also dignified and unruffled. Standing beside Jin Qinhuang, she also appeared peerless. Without a doubt, she should be Jin Qinhuang Fei. In such a solemn occasion, Jin Qinhuang brought her with him. It could be seen that he only valued her. He slightly regretted that he didn't look carefully at the information about this Wang Fei. Li Hongyuan brought Jingwan and slowly walked down. Behind them were Yu Zhongqing and Li Siyan. Behind them were his personal bodyguards and personal maidservants. Ignoring the carriage prepared by the officials of Kai Ming Fu, in just a moment his luxurious caravan was moved down from the ship and put on the horse harness. Before getting on the carriage, Li Hongyuan looked at the 4 horses with disdain, as if he was looking at the most useless waste. Using these things to send Ben Wang off, they really give Ben Wang face. The governor and the inspector governor standing at the front couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. These 4 horses were carefully selected. Although they weren't the best horses in Kai Ming Fu, but the 4 horses were very similar in size, height, and hair. At first glance, one would even think that they were the same horse. There was nothing more suitable than them to pull the carriage. It must be known that as their owner, when he knew that they were used to pull the carriage, his heart ached terribly. But now they were disliked to this extent. If one really wanted to use the best BMW, it was absolutely impossible to find 4 of the same kind. Moreover, who would waste God's gift by using a BMW to pull the carriage? Wang Ye, this concubine, quite likes these 4 horses. I can also see Darren's sincerity and effort. Jingwan smiled. Li Hongyuan's expression softened a little. Since Wang Fei says so, then forget it. Waiting for the 2 to sit down, Yu Zhongqing and Li Siyan rode their horses, one on the left and one on the right of the carriage. In front, there were 2 teams of guards leading the way, and behind them there were even more guards. The other officials either mounted their horses or got on the carriage, scrambling to keep up. The temporary residence prepared for Li Hongyuan was the governor's luxurious courtyard. This place was envied by many people, and once again Jin Qinhuang disliked it. The huge amount of luggage they had brought with them was moved down nimbly, and the courtyard was once again changed into a brand new one. Before, they thought that Jin Qinhuang was purely looking for trouble, but now they maintained their silence. In terms of luxury, in terms of fastidiousness, who could compare to Jin Qinhuang? Sure enough, in this aspect no one should think of bribing him. Even if you took out all your belongings, in his eyes it was nothing. Such beauties? Thinking of Jin Qinhuang Fei, who had already gone to the inner courtyard, thinking of the beauties that Jin Qinhuang kept that were comparable to the emperor's harem, as the information said, it really seemed unlikely. One by one they wanted to worm their way into being friends with him, but Li Hongyuan was not in the mood and did not allow them to say anything. Helpless, they could only take a step back, indicating that there would be a banquet in the evening to welcome Jin Qinhuang. Li Hongyuan sneered, "Do you all have a lot of money? Then can Ben Wang start investigating from you?" Why does Wang Ye say this? Sure enough, after looking at him a few more times, his nature was even more frightening. Li Hongyuan coolly looked at the governor. This broken courtyard, Ben Wang does not fancy it, but the cost of construction probably exceeds your net worth, right? You set up a banquet, what good things can you take out to entertain Ben Wang? Ben Wang is not in the mood to care about you, scram as far as you can. If I don't summon you, don't come in front of Ben Wang. Since he had already said this, who would dare to continue to stay? Outside the door, you look at me, I look at you, their mouths seemed to be filled with coptis. Their hearts were also beating wildly, hard to calm down. Living king of hell, sure enough there was only a wrong name but not a wrong nickname. This kind of person, how to please? Could it be that they had to show that their sleeves were clean, just and upright? This person was also not someone who would fall for this. After all, at the place where Jin Qinhuang had stayed before, the officials learned their lesson and acted in the opposite way, pretending to be poor. As a result, Jin Qinhuang directly confiscated their property, and if it was more than what they said, they were charged with the crime of deceiving the monarch. Without saying anything, they were directly sent to prison. After that, if they did their best to serve him, they could relax a bit. Jin Qinhuang Fei, it seems that this is the only way. If Jin Qinhuang Fei does not meet, or if Jin Qinhuang does not allow them to meet, what should we do? We can't just sit and wait for death, but if there is a possibility, we have to try. He should not stay here for too long, after all, those students cannot be delayed. Jin Qinhuang is not an ordinary person, naturally we cannot infer with common sense. Who knows if he will make an example out of Ming Fu, killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Therefore, the more they spoke, the more uncertain they became. Have you all cleaned up your hands? The governor asked half obscurely. Someone smiled bitterly. How could it be so easy? Some things were not so easy to clean up after they had been done. As long as they investigated to the end, they would definitely be exposed. Jin Qinhuang had a black-clothed guard by his side, and there were a bunch of capable people. Some might help you hide it, but more people wanted to turn your background inside out. Therefore, it really could not withstand a serious investigation. We have to stabilize ourselves, we can't be his target. It is important to think of a way to send this god of plague away. If we can't, the governor's face showed a ruthless expression. Everyone's heart shivered. Unless it was a last resort, no one wanted to take this step. Everyone disperse. The governor waved his hand and left first. The others left one after another. In the other courtyard, Li Hongyuan gently looked at the table as if thinking about something. Master, the matter has been settled. An Yi came in from outside and reported respectfully. Li Hongyuan nodded his head indifferently. Chapter 277. No one would ask what Li Hongyuan sent people to do. This was not within their scope of authority. As to whether to report to Lu Qingdi or not, that was their business. So they all thought at the same time, did he not avoid the taboo? No matter if it was Yu Zhongqing or Li Suyen, they were all experts and would not show their emotions on their faces. It was just that Yu Zhongqing felt that his master, who had just assumed office not long ago, did he also take Li Suyen under his command? So he would not find it strange. This master's position compared to the other princes was much higher. This also explained why he did not avoid the taboo. Of course, this was only his guess. If not, he might be exposed in front of the emperor in the future. So what? As early as when he chose a new master, he already had this awareness. Li Suyen's thinking was slightly different. He did not hide anything from Lu Qingdi. The premise was that it was within his scope of responsibility or was related to him. His task this time was to listen to Jin Qinhuang's orders. Everything else naturally had nothing to do with him. In his view, Li Hongyuan did this either because he did not have a guilty conscience or deliberately did it for them to see. Therefore, the two of them could be said to be Lu Qingdi's left and right arms. There was no tacit understanding to speak of. They were once loyal to Lu Qingdi, but the number of contact was pitifully little. In the end, it was because Lu Qingdi's guard was too heavy. Even if they were his confidants, he did not let them come in contact. Li Hongyuan went to the rear residence. Even Yu Zhongqing, who needed to be close to protect him, would not be an eyesore at this time. Jingwan was quite surprised that Li Hongyuan could tolerate Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen, who were like shadow followers and basically never left his side. Li Hongyuan's explanation was that their existence was similar to that of bodyguards. It was not considered as tolerance. Of course, the so-called similar had nothing to do with trust. Although one would not get dizzy on a boat, it would not be as comfortable as walking on solid ground, unless it was someone who walked outside all year round. Jingwan felt a little tired and needed a good night's sleep to adjust. At this time, he truly felt the benefits of a certain someone's insistence on bringing so much luggage. They were all things that he was used to, so he wouldn't feel uncomfortable using them. This kind of thing, everyone should have experienced. When something was replaced with a new one, it required a process of readaptation. Could be long or short. If it was not as good as the original, one would involuntarily feel different degrees of disdain. When people were tired, they didn't have to experience this feeling. It couldn't be better to be in a comfortable state. Li Hongyuan was considerate and did not torture her, nor did he do anything else. They hugged each other and went to sleep early. Li Hongyuan probably knew that those people would inquire about his whereabouts, so he didn't deliberately hide it. Therefore, when the group of people learned that he had slept with the princess, they couldn't help but look at each other. Even they, who were busy with government affairs, didn't sleep so early, let alone those who had rich nightlife. Even if Jin Qinhuang would not be easily moved by beauty, wasn't it normal for him to relax a bit? Thus he continued to make discreet inquiries, and the results were not disappointing. The princess consort was not feeling well. So, Jin Qinhuang really loved Jin Qinhuang Fei very much. However, since Jin Qinhuang Fei was not feeling well, then it was natural for his foreign to pay a visit. Jingwan didn't know that her own husband had found trouble for her again. The whole morning was as usual. Li Hongyuan looked at his wife's sweat like rain. That flexible figure, he really couldn't get tired of looking at it 100 times. With regards to Li Hongyuan's teasing, Jingwan also bluntly retorted, Wang Ye should pay more attention. If one day the flesh on your body grows soft or even a big belly, remember to send someone to sleep in the study. If you don't recover, don't think about returning to your room. Jingwan's words, if it was someone who only had the relationship of husband and wife, the other party would probably leave in a huff and tell her that there were many women who were willing to sleep with him. Of course, they were only husband and wife and didn't have any feelings. Jingwan also wouldn't say something that was purely a joke. Would Wanwan really be so heartless? This husband really wants to give it a try. Thinking about the incomparably handsome king of hell turning into a fat man with a big belly, even if Jingwan wasn't someone who cared about appearances, just thinking about that image made her eyes stinging. Well, jokes were jokes. Even if he really became like that, she couldn't really drive him out. Not because of the other party's identity, not because he was her husband, but because he was her lover. Although it hadn't reached 100%, but Jingwan knew that if it continued like this, it would happen sooner or later. Unless he went to sleep with another woman now, she wouldn't be able to extricate herself. Okay, if Wang Ye wants to try, how about this concubine also try? Li Hongyuan rubbed his chin with interest. Wanwan's husband singing and wife following suit. My heart is very comforted. This husband is also looking forward to Wanwan's fleshy body. That taste should also be quite wonderful. He even deliberately swept the tip of his tongue across his lips, as if he couldn't wait to have a taste. That look in his eyes also seemed to want to peel off Jingwan's skin. Jingwan was speechless. Facing this bastard, she could only be defeated. She casually threw the handkerchief she used to wipe her sweat over. Not only did he not dislike it, but he also deliberately sniffed it twice and narrowed his eyes slightly. He seemed to be enjoying it, as if he wanted to have her sweat. Jingwan's body inexplicably trembled. She simply ended it in advance and left. But she heard the bastard's wanton laughter. Sure enough, the king of hell was the king of hell. No matter who he met, he was more than a level higher. Li Hongyuan's original purpose was to bring Jingwan out to have fun. He had been in a hurry in the beginning because he didn't want to hear the urgent nagging of the emperor. Wan would definitely not have a good time. But now, since he was already on the verge of it, there was no need to hurry. He would stay in Kaming Mansion for 10 days to half a month and visit the surrounding areas. Therefore, those who couldn't wait for Li Hongyuan to leave quickly would be so angry that they would vomit 3 liters of blood if they knew about this. Nanny Gong and the others had already known Li Hongyuan's purpose, so they had basically prepared everything to go out. After breakfast they rested for a while. Jingwan saw a man who looked to be in his early 30s. His skin was darker than ordinary people. At first glance he looked like a person who worked outside all year round. Jingwan was quite curious about why her husband specially asked such a person to come here. However, Jingwan found that this person seemed to be more respectful to her than to the king of hell. Generally speaking, when the couple sat together and greeted each other, it was enough for them to bow to each other. However, he bowed to each other separately. When he bowed to each other, he especially turned to one side. It was obvious that he was bowing to her. Jingwan was very sure that she had never seen this person before. Then why did he behave like this? He is the one who got one of the 10 purses from Great Elder Princess. He is also the one you specially sent to teach him. Now he works in the Ministry of War and cooperates with you in drawing the geomantic map. Jingwan's eyes lit up. That's the one. He's practically traveled all over Qiyuan Empire and has also set foot in many neighboring countries. His memory is also very outstanding. Basically, there's no place that he can't remember, including the characteristics and terrain. He can remember everything clearly. He's like a living geomantic map. Your Highness, you flatter me. The living geomantic map said modestly. Li Hongyuan glanced at him and was a little unhappy. Your Highness, you remember it clearly. Jingwan grabbed Li Hongyuan excitedly and did not notice his strange behavior at the moment. Yuan, thank you. How could she not know that he specially brought this person out for her? To be honest, no one could be so considerate as this man. Not even her grandmother could be so considerate. Li Hongyuan's eyes softened when he saw her beaming with joy. She even called him a nickname that she only used in private when there were outsiders present. Since she was so happy, he did not want to dampen her spirits. He reluctantly treated the living geomantic map as a dead one. Moreover, their first impression of the living geomantic map was exactly the same. It's good that you are happy. I think that with him we should be able to have more fun. Jingwan nodded. That was right. This map was more useful than the electronic version of the map. It was simply a must-have for traveling. After the excitement, Jingwan became more reserved and began to chat with the living geomantic map. For a moment she forgot that someone was a minefield. She immediately paused and said, I don't know your surname. If he was called the living geomantic map it would be rude. Your Highness, you are too polite. My surname is Sure. The living geomantic map hurriedly responded. Jingwan felt that he seemed a little nervous. Oh, it's Mr. Sure. Speaking of which, Prince used public resources for private purposes because of me this time. I hope that it won't delay Mr. Sure's business. Your Highness is too serious. To be able to contribute to Your Highness, this official feels honored. These words were not false. Originally, in the entire group the others were selected by others. Only he was personally selected by Li Hongyuan. Originally, he was busy and because his knowledge was put to use he was preparing to show off his skills. Suddenly, he had to go on a business trip. His mood was not very good. However, he did not have the right to refuse and could only sullenly follow along. It was only when he knew that his benefactor Jin Qingwang Fei was also present that his mood subsided. Previously, when he found out that Jin Qingwang Fei was going on a trip and needed him to lead the way, the last bit of sullenness completely disappeared. Speaking of which, Wang Fei's grace is like a new life. I have long wanted to thank Wang Fei in person but I never had the chance. I was deeply afraid that I would offend Wang Fei and did not dare to pay you a visit. Having this opportunity is truly the fortune of 3 lifetimes. What does Princess Consort want to know? I will tell you everything I know in the next pass. Sure, Darren doesn't need to be like this. The matter at that time was just a coincidence. My original intention was to contribute to the Qi Yuan dynasty. I only hope that the Qi Yuan dynasty will prosper. If it wasn't you it would be someone else. Therefore Sure Darren really doesn't need to care. No matter what the prefix was, as long as it was related to the word affection, Jingwan did not want this defection to be too deep and heavy to bear. I don't know anything. I want to learn something but it's useless. No matter how hard I tried I couldn't learn it. Don't talk about disappointing my family and clan. Don't even talk about my career. Almost everyone looked at this official as if they were looking at a piece of trash. This official was once dispirited and gave up on myself. If it wasn't for Wang Fei's people who came to my door and exhausted their efforts, that purse would not have landed in this official's hands. How would I be able to enter the Ministry of War? This official was placed in an important position. My parents were gratified and my wife was happy. This official could confidently talk to my children about the magnificent mountains and rivers of Qiyuan. No one would say that those things were useless and would only say that it was amazing. Furthermore, the way my children looked at me was also filled with respect. At the same time, my family's status in the clan also rose. Wang Fei was the first to acknowledge the things that I had denied. She even used this as a way to embark on a completely different life. How could I forget such kindness? Not only this official but the entire family also wishes to kowtow to Wang Fei in person to express our gratitude. After all, Wang Fei was already precious when you were still in the boudoir. Now you are even more precious. Other than a word of thanks, there's really nothing I can do to repay you. Living Geomancy Map spoke with sincerity. Jingwan sighed softly and did not know what to say. In fact, Jingwan knew a little about this official's situation. In order to make better use of that purse, there were some things that needed to be clarified. However, she only heard about it from Nanny Gong. What she heard was only the general situation. Now it seemed that it was not so easy to just change the owner of the purse. Thinking about it, it made sense. The opportunity to show one's face in front of His Majesty might lead to a bright future. It was not so easy to give it away. Therefore, the person that Nanny Gong sent out to persuade her was also a talent. Li Hongyuan gently pinched Jingwan's mouth. Whatever Wang Fei says is what it is. There's no need to say anything else. If Wang Fei has a good time on this trip to Jiangnan, I will count it as a great merit. He did not hide his purpose at all. Not far away, Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen lowered their eyebrows and narrowed their eyes. They held the hilts of the sabers at their waists and stood straight like wooden pillars. It was as if they did not hear anything. This official will do his best. In order to have a good time, Jingwan was determined to travel light. It was still a mighty group of people. Others could tell at a glance that they were not ordinary people. Not clearing the area was the same as clearing the area, but there would be no atmosphere. Of course, Jingwan also knew that their identities were special. It was impossible for them to be like ordinary people. Her request was only to make them look like a rich young master taking his wife out on a trip. It was enough. There must be a lot of hidden guards. She knew very well that on this trip to Jiangnan, her husband had blocked many paths. If he was really impartial, many people would suffer. Who could guarantee that these people would not take the risk? Compared to Li Hongyuan's life and wealth, sightseeing was nothing. What Jingwan could think of, Li Hongyuan could naturally also think of. Moreover, with Wan by his side, he naturally had to be foolproof. He could not even affect Jingwan's sightseeing. The arrangements could not be incomplete. No matter how relaxed he looked on the surface, it could not be denied that he did things in secret. After having people deal with the people who were watching around the courtyard, the group of people went out through the back door. It was obvious that if those officials knew not long after they went out, there would be one chance encounter after another. The sightseeing could be stopped. Not only did they prepare a carriage, they also prepared horses. It was not that they were worried that Jingwan would be uncomfortable sitting in the carriage for too long. She would not stay in the carriage for too long for sightseeing. It was just that in some places, it was more fun to ride a horse. At this time, the carriage and the servants followed behind the two people walking hand in hand. The guards on both sides slightly opened the way for them. The living map historian was 2 steps behind Jingwan to the left. He explained the cultural and historical characteristics of the Kaming mansion to Jingwan. As Jingwan walked, her attention was almost attracted. The living king of hell expressed his displeasure, but he had to admit that the living geomancy map was indeed amazing in this aspect. To say that he was a living geomancy map was actually a disgrace. Even Li Hongyuan himself was attracted by it, so he suppressed his displeasure and multitasked. While listening, he led the way for his wife, who was too engrossed to prevent her from going astray. Speaking of which, food was also a part of a place. Lord Shi specially introduced 2 kinds of food to Jingwan. There might be food in other places, but it was definitely not as delicious as the Kaming mansion. Jingwan's appetite was aroused. He wanted to eat such little food. Naturally, she bought, and bought. Jingwan asked people to buy more for everyone to try. They rested for a while in the tea house next door. They waited for the people who bought the food to come back. However, they only bought one kind of food. The other kind was limited every day and was said to be sold out. They could use their status to pressure people and ask them to make it immediately. Not to mention that the princess would not allow it, it would also expose their whereabouts. I'm incompetent. The guard did not do the job well and apologized. What does it have to do with you? Jingwan overstepped her authority and waved her hand to ask him to leave. The guard did not even look at Li Hongyuan's reaction and retreated to another table. Jingwan asked people to distribute most of the food. This was her habitual behavior. In the eyes of others, it was a reward. And the people who had done it for the first time were even a little flattered. It was not the first time. At the beginning, Jingwan was a little helpless. After many times, she was used to it and just waved her hand. Jingwan tasted it. It was very delicious and also quite unique. I don't know what the Kaming crisps taste like. It's a pity. I can only try it another day. Speaking of which, it's a little surprising that it was sold out so quickly. After all, relatively speaking, the price of Kaming crisps is not cheap. Very few commoners can afford to eat it. It's still early today. If it was not bought out by a rich family, it should not be sold out so quickly. Lord Shi continued. Is that so? Then there's no other way. However, we will not be staying in Kaming Mansion for one day. It doesn't matter if it's one more day. How can Ben Wang's Wang Fei be so wronged? Later, let someone go to the other courtyard to make it. Not to mention the people who served Jingwan, including Lord Shi, Yu Zhongqing, Li Suyen and the others, all naturally thought so. Wasn't it so? A dignified Wang Fei eating something from you was a great favor. What was the reason for wanting her to wait another day? Qin Wang Fei did not make things difficult for her because she was benevolent. Jingwan wanted to say something, but after thinking about it, she decided to let it go. This was a matter of perception. It was created by the social background. It was not something that could be explained clearly in 1 or 2 sentences. Moreover, if she said too much, other people would not feel that she was right. They would feel that she was deviating from the norm and associated with the common people. It was not a big matter, so there was no need to haggle over every ounce. Let's go? Jingwan said with a smile. Li Hongyuan nodded and took the lead to get up. Very naturally, he reached out to support Jingwan. His every move was seen by Lord Shi. Because of Jingwan's kindness, he believed that it was not only him. The other 9 people, as long as they knew how to repay kindness, they all hoped that Jingwan could be well, have a good husband and have a happy family. At the time when she was bestowed the marriage with Qin Wang, they had a lot of worries in their hearts. But they could not say it, they could not care. After all, she was an outsider. If they interfered, it would have a bad influence on her. Thus, they could only watch helplessly. However, up until now, everything was good. The happiest thing was that Qin Wang loved her deeply and did not throw her to the side after marrying her. Just based on Li Hongyuan's attitude towards Jingwan, Lord Shi's view of him had changed by 70%. Jingwan did not plan to leave the city today. She was prepared to walk around the city. According to what Lord Shi said, Kai Mingfu actually had a history of more than 2,000 years. It had been rebuilt on a large scale several times. Not only that, it was the capital city of 2 dynasties. Could be imagined that it should have a lot of advantages in many aspects. There were many places that were worth exploring. For example, there were some ancient buildings and treasures that recorded the detailed history of Kai Mingfu. In addition to these, there were also places similar to gardens in Kai Mingfu. That was not the private property of anyone in Kai Mingfu, rather it belonged to the public property that no one in Kai Mingfu could occupy. It was said that it was left behind by the first governor of the Kai Mingfu of the Qiyuan dynasty. He was an old official of the previous dynasty and his hometown was also in Kai Mingfu. He was not young, but when he was in office for 4 years, a sudden illness took his life. Before his death, he did something that was simply shocking in the eyes of the world. He donated all the property that belonged to his branch and did not leave a single copper coin for his descendants, let alone his clansmen. He also declared that these things belonged to the entire Kai Mingfu. If it was occupied by an individual, it would mean that the Qiyuan dynasty would change. These words were very ruthless and directly alarmed Emperor Taizu. Emperor Taizu personally made the decision and issued an imperial edict to acknowledge his last wishes. As a result, his clansmen who originally stomped their feet and did not want him to enter the ancestral grave all shut their mouths and did not dare to say another word. Not only that, they also had to give him a grand burial. Today it was unknown whether those unseen legacies were still there or not. That garden was still there and had even become a symbol of Kai Ming Fu. When one arrived at Kai Ming Fu, if one did not take a look at it, it would seem that one had not been here before. In Jingwan's opinion, this was simply the feudal version of giving away one's property for charity. When she first heard about it, Jingwan even suspected that this person had the same origin as her. After careful investigation, the possibility was too small because other than that he did not leave behind anything advanced. However, even Jingwan felt that it was inconceivable because he was an aboriginal. How should she put it? The history of the Qiyuan and even the Qiyuan before was very similar to the history of her previous life. Under the feudal dynasty, the emphasis was on the family, the clan, the protection of the descendants and the roots. Everything was done for the future generations. Giving away one's property to a person before one's death was something that no one could understand. Therefore, even those who had benefited from him did not understand, let alone agree with his practice. They only said that he was simply crazy. Jingwan felt that perhaps she could understand because of her own reasons. She then asked Lord Shi about the governor's life and the situation of his descendants. Sure enough, when he was alive, he was the only one who held the highest position and power in the entire family. There was no one else who was decent. Although the property that he gave away was his private property, it was 70% of the total property of the entire family. It was no wonder that his clansmen were so angry. They even said that he was unfilial as he even gave away the things left behind by his ancestors. They also could not blame him for using the Qiyuan's fate as a curse. A few years after his death, his descendants were the first to rise, followed by the other clansmen. Until now, they had multiplied into a family that could not be underestimated in the entire Qiyuan, the Wei family. Jingwan heard everything and sighed softly. This Governor Wei is really bold. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Lord Shi asked, "Princess, why do you say that? Without destruction there can be no construction." This is probably the reason why Governor Wei did this. The Wei clan, or perhaps the direct descendants of Governor Wei, should have something like a letter left behind by him. Otherwise, his earnest expectations and painstaking efforts would have been wasted if no one understood. I just don't know if he hid it away or gave it to someone. Princess, your words are interesting. But you are the person who fits Governor Wei's temperament the best. Li Hongyuan said. I didn't understand it at first, but after listening to your words, I suddenly feel enlightened. It seems that the world has misunderstood Governor Wei. We are not as good as you, Princess. Lord Shi bowed. Lord Shi, you flatter me. Jingwan did not explain further. Perhaps Governor Wei's thinking was slightly more advanced than others. The Grand Secretary's second wife is from the Wei family. The second wife is also a descendant of Governor Wei. It's just that she is 5 generations away from the main branch. Li Xian suddenly said. Jingwan was stunned. She didn't expect there to be such a connection. As one of the leaders of the blackguard, it was not surprising that she knew this. But did Li Xian suddenly say this because she suddenly thought of this, or did she have a special intention? On the other hand, Li Hongyuan tilted his head slightly to look at Li Suyen. His gaze changed slightly. There was no doubt that Wan Ruizhong's second wife was a spy. However, he now felt that things were not that simple. The most important point was that Governor Wei was an old official of the previous dynasty. There was a need to send someone to investigate. If there was no problem, it would be fine. If there was a problem, after listening to the story, Jingwan's attention was finally diverted.